لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для обеспечения полного и качественного устного перевода необходимо поступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, I hereby declare open the 29th meeting of the 59th session of the Human Rights Council. We will now begin the annual thematic panel discussion on technical cooperation and capacity building, being held pursuant to Council Resolution 57/32. The theme of this year's panel is the role of technical cooperation and capacity building in strengthening national structures which play a role in promoting and safeguarding human rights, particularly national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. This panel is accessible to persons with disabilities through the provision of international sign interpretation and real-time captioning, together with the other accessibility measures. It is my honor to welcome Mr. Mahamane Siseguro, Director of the Human Rights Council and Treaty Mechanisms Division at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, who will deliver the opening statement. Let me also welcome our distinguished panelists, Her Excellency Madam Usana Barnananda, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Thailand to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva, His Excellency Mr. Mario Raul Cano Ricciardi, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Paraguay to the United Nations offices and other international organizations in Geneva. Madam Amina Bouach, President of the National Human Rights Council of Morocco and Chairperson of Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, and Madam Sarah Aguas, Head of the Human Rights Unit in the International Political Organizations Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. I encourage all speakers to intervene in an interactive way, present comments, and ask questions that reflect the panelists' intervention and the discussion. The speaking time is 1 minute and 30 seconds for all, and a maximum of 40 speakers will be accommodated. Delegates inscribed on the list of speakers who cannot take the floor due to the time constraints can upload their statements to be posted on the extranet. Now I have the honor to invite Mr. Mahamane Siseguro to deliver the opening statement. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished panelists, colleagues, I'm pleased to open this important annual discussion on technical cooperation in support of national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. the technical cooperation and capacity building program of the office span a range of areas from sustainable development to principled business practices, environmental justice, and human conditions in place of detention. All these programs have in common the fundamental goal of providing carefully targeted assistance to states on the ground to facilitate the authorities' protection and fulfillment of human rights in the daily lives of their people. This targeted, practical, and cooperative fieldwork brings immediate and long-term benefit to people everywhere. It is essential to the protection and advancement of human rights around the world and a key component of our support to the establishment of accessible and effective national human rights mechanisms. National human rights institutions and national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up both play a frontline role in the respect, protection, and fulfillment of human rights at the grassroots level. Their role, however, are distinct. National human rights institutions, or NHRIs, should comply fully with the standard of independence and credibility enshrined in the Paris Principle and serve as a human rights watchdog. National mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, or NMRF, are governmental structures embedded within the civil service with the aim of ensuring implementation of all international human rights recommendations. These two bodies need to remain distinct, but they are complementary. Together, they form a robust national architecture for human rights protection. When compliant with the Paris Principle, national human rights institutions bring independence, accountability, public trust, and a space for rights holders to be heard. National mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up delivers coordination, continuity, and coherence in their action as duty bearers. When they work in synergy, national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up strengthen each other's impact. Our technical cooperation aims to foster this complementarity by supporting the interaction of both bodies, clarifying roles, and building bridges where needed. Technical cooperation also needs to be demand-driven, rooted in local realities, and inclusive, particularly of people in vulnerable situations. Excellencies, last year the Office supported the establishment or strengthening of national human rights institutions in 18 countries, contributing to a global total of 89 national human rights institutions with A status compared to 78 in 2018. We also provided technical assistance to national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up in over 30 countries, including through digital human rights tracking tool and support to reporting to treaty bodies. For instance, in North Macedonia, our support strengthened the capacity and engagement of the National Human Rights Institution on environmental justice, particularly with respect to the public's right to information and meaningful participation by civil society in decision-making. In the Pacific, our regional office supported the establishment of a regional national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up platform, enabling small island states to pool resources and share good practices. In Morocco, our work with the National Mechanism for Implementation, Reporting, and Follow-up has boosted implementation of the Convention Against Torture. In addition, our joint advocacy work has spurred greater understanding across the MENA region of the optional protocol on the abolition of torture and the work of the subcommittee on the prevention of torture. This has led to steps toward ratification of the OPCAT, notably in Iraq. In the Republic of Korea, we assisted the National Human Rights Institution and the National Mechanism for Implementation, Reporting, and Follow-up to set up a joint monitoring framework that has improved follow-up on UPR recommendations. In recent years, our office has also concentrated on enhancing the capacity of national human rights institutions in Central Asia to engage with human rights mechanisms. As a result of our collaboration, national human rights institutions from Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan have submitted alternative reports, including several cases that mark their first ever submissions. They have also provided oral briefing to treaty bodies regarding the human rights situation in their respective countries. We also partner with NANRI, which is the network of African national human rights institutions, to facilitate peer-to-peer learning on working with national mechanisms for reporting, implementation, and follow-up. Excellencies, our many years of engagement with these fundamental institutions leads me to urge states to invest in human rights by strengthening national human rights framework, including through sustainable funding and capacity building. This should include support for institutional development, targeted assistance for joint initiative, and regional and cross-regional peer learning. I also encourage states and global partners to promote structured, collaborative interaction between national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. This can be done through joint training, collaboration on data systems, and inclusive national human rights action plan. Mr. Vice President, to uphold human rights and ensure that they become anchored in people's life everywhere requires work that is grounded in people's experiences. It takes deep knowledge and tireless advocacy that is local and national, as well as regional and global. I take the opportunity of this discussion to reaffirm the strong commitment of OHCHR to assisting the work of principled, effective, and interconnected national human rights systems. Our technical cooperation is not just about strengthening sustainable capacity, it's about accompanying transformation, enabling states to meet their obligation, and empowering people to claim their rights. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the panelists for their initial presentations. Now I have the honor to give the floor first to Her Excellency, Madam Usana Barnananda. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And first of all, I would like to thank OHCHR for organizing this important panel discussion. As a penholder of the resolution on the enhancement of technical cooperation and capacity building in the field of human rights, I also wish to thank the core group members of resolution 57/32, namely Brazil, Indonesia, Norway, Honduras, Singapore, Turkey, and Qatar for their efforts and dedication in advancing this important agenda within the Council. For Thailand, item 10 is a uniquely impactful agenda item as cooperation is undertaken with the consent of countries concerned and take into account its tailor-made and take into account the specific context of the country concerned, their priorities and their needs. It also grounded in mutual respect, genuine partnership, which help create the sense of national ownership to the project. And in this regard, we hold a strong conviction in the practical value of technical cooperation, particularly in reinforcing the national human rights architecture through the development and strengthening of national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, as mentioned by the director. Technical cooperation and capacity building are therefore are very useful tools which shall be designed to help states to turn their normative commitments into concrete actions to help address human rights situation and help improve the life and well-being of people on the ground. In the case of Thailand, the principle has also guided our efforts to strengthen the Rights and Liberties Protection Department, or RLPD, under the Ministry of Justice, to serve as the main body, a driving force behind our national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. This mechanism has played a central role in ensuring coherence in Thailand's human rights obligation. With the support of international partners, including the UNHRC, we have enhanced the RLPD's institutional capacity through targeted workshops and interagency coordination, aligning reporting and implementation under the core human rights treaties. I'll give you some concrete example that we could accomplish through this mechanism. For example, Thailand has raised the minimum age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 12. This is the implementation following the UPR recommendation. Another example is the enactment of Thailand's Prevention and Suppression of Torture and Enforced Disappearance Act in 2022. And this allowed us to fully implement our obligations under the CAT Convention. Importantly, our national mechanism for implementation and reporting and follow-up, they don't work in isolation. They work closely with our National Human Rights Commission in a very mutually reinforcing manner. Each of them have operate under that distinct mandate, but that collaboration strengthened the overall coherence and effectiveness of our national human rights architecture. So capacity building support, including training session from SHR and peer learning with other national human rights institutions, has empowered our National Human Rights Commission to undertake independent investigations, prepare human rights situation reports, and work on specific areas such as the development of a child-friendly complaint mechanism in collaboration with UNICEF. So together, the UNHRC and NMIRF exemplify how technical cooperation can enable complementary structures to function within their mandates while reinforcing each other's efforts, both at the policy and operational level. So in closing, I would like to underline that the technical cooperation, when conducted with consent, with national ownership and mutual respect, remains one of the most pragmatic and constructive tools in the Council toolbox. The director used the term tangible, targeted, and practical measures. So this is really important. However, as we all know that we are facing liquidity crisis, cooperation cannot be sustained only with political will, but we need financial sustainability to support the programs. So in this context, we must ensure that resources for technical cooperation under Agenda Item 10 are not overlooked or deprioritized. These activities are essential, not secondary. They are the very mechanism through which the Human Rights Council support national efforts to uphold human rights on the ground. At the same time, we therefore encourage investment in South-South and triangular cooperation, which has proven to be effective and sustainable way for countries to share experiences, technologies, and practical solutions tailored to national realities. The role of OSCHR is very important. last year we should continue to invest on in the tools that help bridge Geneva and the national level. One good practice is the development of online knowledge repositories as mandated by the HRC resolution 54/28 to document lessons learned and disseminate best practices among practitioners. This will be a very important tool. So I'd like to urge states to continue providing support to the work of OSCHR so that we can ensure that the rights of people and the situation on the ground will be addressed and improve the life of individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Now I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mario Raul Cano Riccardi. Excellency, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Distinguished fellow panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for us to have been invited to contribute our own perspectives and experiences on such a valuable opportunity to exchange ideas, experience of difficulties, as well as progress and achievements regarding technical cooperation and capacity building on human rights. The theme of this annual debate, focusing on the role of technical cooperation and capacity building in strengthening national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, is one which we are particularly interested in, and one which affects us deeply. Multilateralism, promoting cooperation, dialogue, and global solidarity are essential pillars of Paraguay's foreign policy. Regrettably, we have a global complexity, and the multilateral system is facing very many challenges. We have growing levels of a lack of confidence, which make dialogue difficult. And to this, we must add all of the difficulties faced by multilateral institutions, which have to find an effective solution to global problems. Given this scenario, the efficiency of our international system also depends on how we will ensure consistent results for human rights, as this is one of the 3 pillars of the United Nations. Now, after these brief introductory words, I wish to focus more on the sub-theme, which is the modalities and the importance of technical cooperation in supporting the establishment of national human rights structures. And that is the national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. Now, although they have different roles, these 2 figures are complementary and mutually reinforce each other. As national stakeholders, there's no doubt that each one contributes to the respect, the protection, and guarantee for human rights at the national level as part of their mandates and functions. Now, when it comes to modalities for cooperation, on the basis of our experience, we can say that regardless of the type of institution, be they bilateral, regional, multilateral, South-South, North-South, triangular, or anything else, what is important is that all relevant stakeholders have an approach which is grounded in mutual respect, shared responsibilities, complementarity, and ensuring that there is a particular adaptation to each individual context and to national challenges. And all of this must also be bounded on international obligations and commitments on human rights. Now, this will lead to institutional strengthening on the basis of national appropriation or empowerment, sustainability, and learning together. Now, when it comes to national human rights structures, including national human rights institutions, and particularly national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, then it's particularly important to focus on learning together and having a peer exchange. This is one of the most enriching and beneficial exercises if we want to strengthen these structures after they've been set up. And we must ensure that the approach is adapted to the needs and challenges which are specific to each state. In fact, one of the most recent reports of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights on the national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up emphasizes that states are increasingly interested in learning from each other when it comes to establishing a structure and the functioning of these mechanisms. And the report recommended fostering a direct exchange between peers. Along these lines, therefore, on Monday, the 30th of June last month, we held a second seminar on the basis of Resolution 51/33 of 2022. And we're also working on developing a virtual knowledge exchange, which will give access to resources. Now, given the general liquidity crisis of the United Nations in recent times, it's the states themselves, together with other stakeholders, that have promoted initiatives and activities for exchanges between peers, including technical cooperation. Now, relating specifically to national mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, we have the Marrakesh and Asunción declarations of 2022 and 2024, respectively. And these laid the foundation for the setting up of the international network of national mechanisms. And we have made progress on the guidelines, which are known as the Marrakesh Guidance Framework. Now, it's particularly important for competent bodies of the United Nations, especially the country teams, as part of their mandates, to include technical cooperation and capacity building on human rights within their work and their programs. In Paraguay, we have had very positive experiences of support for our national mechanism called CIMORE Plus by the United Nations country team, including input from the human rights advisor of the OHCHR, UNDP, UN Women, UNICEF, and UNFPA. Despite this, it is continuously necessary to increase the voluntary contributions to United Nations funds in order to support technical assistance and capacity building on human rights. My own country is a real example of how these funds can have an impact, a positive impact on capacity building for state institutions. In fact, voluntary funds granted to OHCHR were used for the initial setup of the digital platform that our national mechanism CIMORE Plus relies on. Because of this support, we were able to put in place the technical cooperation program called CIMORE Paraguay. And we began to share this experience with interested countries that were interested in strengthening their own national human rights bodies. We did this through South-South and triangular cooperation systems. And we were therefore able to show that all states, regardless of their size or level of development, have something valuable to contribute when it comes to sharing experiences on the implementation of human rights obligations and commitments. So I very much hope that this is a seminar which will further strengthen peer exchange experiences. And I hope that we will have an enriching meeting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Madam Amina Bouwach, President of the National Human Rights Council of Morocco and Chairperson of Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Vice President. صباح الخير للجميع. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, at the outset I would like to thank you for the invitation, a very kind invitation for national human rights institutions. This is a precious framework for exchanges that gives us the opportunity to share our experiences, to shed light on progress we've achieved, but also to share the challenges that we face in a day-to-day basis. I would like to talk about our context. Something has already been said by the previous speakers. More than ever, there's an effective cooperation and articulation between the national human rights institutions and reporting and follow-up mechanisms. This complementarity today, more than ever, is essential to ensure the solid continuousness and legitimacy of basic human rights protection systems. This requires more than just a statement of intentions. It needs strong political will and a shared commitment, shared vision, connecting local systems and universal mechanisms. In my capacity as President of GUNRI and the National Human Rights Institution of the Kingdom of Morocco, it's up to me today to feed this collective thinking at the nexus between global stakes and national realities. Now, thinking in this vein is more than ever necessary to identify our shared challenges and to identify the obstacles that hinder us implementing our mandates, but also to mobilize the resources that we need to allow national human rights institutions to fully play their role. Now, just a few weeks ago in New York, on behalf of GUNRI, we advocated for shoring up, strengthening the role of these bodies in the UN system, not just in New York. And we underscored then the importance of this interaction and for it to be supersized in order to place greater value and emphasis on their unique capacity to translate international standards and norms into concrete action that are effective and adapted to the realities in the field. Excellencies, guaranteeing human rights is not just a matter of transposing texts. Above all, it is a challenge to defend human dignity in all aspects, to prevent violations, to respond rigorously and with humanity to the concerns of citizens, institutions, but also societies within countries. This mission is being implemented in a context that is ever more complex as we see multilateralism shrink back, as we see geopolitical tensions, but above all, most importantly, we see persistent discrimination. Sometimes we see the universality of basic human rights challenged. To me, this is a major opportunity to bring a response and to strengthen the technical connections and interactions between the different stakeholders and actors. Now, the UN is going through a budgetary crisis which illustrates these tensions. It has direct impacts on interaction with national human rights institutions and civil society, with international mechanisms. It limits their efficacy, and therefore it weakens the whole system of accountability of states. It is as we face these interconnected challenges that we note that no isolated response will be enough. Technical responses and capacity building are a part of the response. We also need a framework of action that is coherent, that is capable of predicting violations, shoring up protections, and effectively promoting human rights. This framework for cooperation can only be built on structures that are solid, on legal mechanisms that are predictable, on genuine complementarity between actors and above all between national human rights institutions and reporting mechanisms. Our panel today, ladies and gentlemen, would like to highlight two essential pillars of the entire national system for protecting human rights. Now, these independent bodies, national human rights institutions, have broad mandates respecting the Paris principles and national mechanisms charged with follow-up and international recommendations and editing reports. Now, there was a report published, a study by Gunnery on the experience of 58 national institutions out of a total of 118, and it was able to identify 4 major categories of national mechanisms. First, ad hoc mechanisms created for a short period of time for a specific report and then disassembled. Second, mechanisms in ministries, integrated to ministries, with continuity and coordination as well as follow-up. 3, interministerial mechanisms, which bring together several ministers in a permanent joint structure. And 4th, mechanisms that are distinct and discrete institutionally with their own budget, their own personnel, empowerment, autonomy, and functioning. These different configurations beget different questions and concerns with respect to gunnery. As for that first model, for example, it is capable of ensuring effective, coherent implementation of international recommendations, but to what degree and for how long? So we have questions. What coherent framework should be adopted to defend human dignity, to prevent violations, and to mutually strengthen protection and promotion of human rights and ensure technical cooperation? 2, can we satisfy ourselves with establishing mechanisms without ensuring that they are genuinely effective in reporting and follow-up, as is the case with that first model I mentioned? Whilst welcoming the creation of international networks of reporting and follow-up mechanisms, we at GAMRI would advocate for a structured dialogue between national human rights institutions and national mechanisms with a clear mandate to guarantee synergy, efficacy, and shared governance. That, in my opinion, is the most important element. And so transposing international recommendations into public policies on a concrete level remains a challenge, whatever model is chosen. This transformation implies an inclusive, participatory approach that mobilizes all the stakeholders around a shared project, that is, building a protection system that rests on clear laws, credible institutions, and recourse mechanisms that are accessible to victims of human rights and efficient and effective. When national human rights institutions enjoy genuine independence under the Paris principles, they are then capable of fully executing their triple mission of prevention, protection, and promotion of human rights. More and more, we are seeing that these institutions do have the mandate of national mechanisms for the prevention of torture. Another aspect that is worthy of our full attention, ensuring full technical cooperation, the transformation of universal standards into tangible realities is never a linear process. Often it comes up against structural obstacles, political contexts that are constantly shifting sands, and issues of concern such as withdrawal and non-engagement. Human rights are not an option. They are an indispensable foundation of all just, resilient societies. It is up to us to renew and update that foundation to guarantee its integrity and to ensure it is permanent as we see constant changes in the challenges that arise. I thank you for your attention.
Now I give the floor to Madam Sara Guas, Head of Human Rights Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share our experiences in this annual discussion on the role technical cooperation can play in strengthening national structures for the protection of human rights, particularly national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up. Portugal believes that the NMIRF agenda is one of the most consequential in the human rights field. NMIRFs are practical instruments that ensure that the human rights agenda extends beyond the work done in Geneva or human rights or New York and translates into measurable policies that affect citizens' daily lives. They turn abstract obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights into concrete action. Our long-standing commitment stems from Portugal's own NMIRF, established around 15 years ago. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is presides the executive secretariat to this mechanism, and in this capacity that I speak to you here today. Since the establishment of our National Human Rights Committee, we have made significant progress. One, on improving coordination and reporting. We streamlined procedures, improved the information flow between different ministries, and eliminated our reporting backlog. Number two, through the structured engagement with civil society and inclusive institutional involvement. Our mechanism maintains a structured and regular dialogue with NGOs. Furthermore, the Parliament, the Public Prosecutor's Office, and the Ombudsperson, our national human rights institution, serve as permanent observers, playing key oversight roles in policy design and implementation. We are engaging with representatives of local authorities so they can become members as well. The active participation of our UNHRC in the work of our interministerial mechanism is an example of how the articulation of the two entities can contribute to a well-functioning human rights ecosystem without compromising the independence of the first. We have a flexible, versatile working structure. The committee's composition adapts to the issues under discussion, allowing for frequent focused meetings. For example, we have specific working groups on subjects such as business and human rights, or to develop sets of human rights indicators. But most importantly, our NMIRF helped to build ownership and mainstream human rights across the public administration. The engagement with human rights mechanism and the implementation of their outcomes is no longer perceived as an external obligation, but as a shared responsibility across government. The national mechanism has led to tangible human rights advancements, the most recent being the legislative reform that increased the minimum legal age for marriage from 16 to 18 years, eliminating all exceptions. We've also faced challenges along the way, one of them being managing a vast amount of information without proper digital tracking system. Like many other countries, we currently handle more than 600 recommendations from several UN mechanisms alongside regional human rights recommendations and national plans. Thanks to robust support from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, we are now in the process of adhering to the National Recommendations Tracking Database. Having in a single national database all human rights recommendations and commitments will allow clustering and assignment of recommendations, designation of responsible entities, and scheduling of actions. Will enable ministries and other actors to provide continuous updates, facilitate tracking processes and impact measurements, as well as streamline reporting. Just last week, we submitted our report to the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, the first report entirely coordinated through the platform. Observers have been given access to the platform as well, enhancing transparency and scrutiny. We anticipate rolling out the full implementation soon. The introduction of digital tools is one example of how NMIRFs, regardless of the country and the national circumstances, can benefit from technical support, enabling more consistent coordination, long-term monitoring, and more effective public interventions. When it comes to NMIRFs, there is no one-size-fits-all. They can take a variety of forms and operate in different ways. However, we find it very useful to learn from one another and exchange best practices and how to overcome common difficulties. We have been doing so through bilateral consultations with a variety of different countries. Last year, we had a visit to Lisbon of an interministerial delegation from Guinea-Bissau for exchanges with our UNHRC and our NMIRF, with the support from the Office of the OHCHR in Bissau. These exchanges proved useful for both sides. We do it also through different structures and networks, namely the group of friends of NMIRFs here in Geneva that Portugal is proud to share expertise, good practices, and lessons learned. The network of human rights focal points for Portuguese-speaking countries, which was established in 2023 and will soon adopt an action plan to guide the network's activities over the next 5 years, with a core objective of promoting the creation and enhancement of NMIRFs. And also the international network of NMIRFs, where Portugal, together with Morocco and Paraguay, integrates the executive committee. The next international seminar will be held in Lisbon, where we hope to approve the first plan to guide our work. We welcome further member states to join the network. We appreciate and further encourage the support from the OHCHR and the UN system to continue strengthening NMIRFs through capacity building initiatives, the creation of digital platforms, and facilitating peer-to-peer exchanges. We also look forward to the repository of good practices currently being developed by the High Commissioner's Office. We hope that the current liquidity crisis is not an impediment to these actions, as technical assistance has the potential to significantly enhance the efficiency of NMIRFs, leading to tangible improvements in human rights protection. Like other fellow panelists have said, in an era that is marked by increased polarization in multilateral fora, NMIRFs stand as critical instruments, ensuring that human rights commitments are translated into actionable, inclusive, and accountable national policies, thereby reaffirming the universality and indivisibility of human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Excellencies, distinguished participants, we will now begin the first segment of the list of speakers. All interventions from the floor are limited to 1 minute and 30 seconds. The list of speakers is now closed. And the first speaker on my list is the distinguished delegate of European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The EU thanks the OHCHR for organizing this panel discussion and welcomes the OHCHR for its report. Human rights are a foundation for dignity, equality, and justice. Strengthening relevant national human rights structures is important to ensure these rights are not only recognized, but effectively respected, protected, and fulfilled. Stronger national human rights institutions and mechanisms for implementation, reporting, and follow-up contribute to ensuring that human rights are adequately safeguarded. The European Union placed significant emphasis on supporting institutional capacity and independence of NHRIs, ensuring they comply with the Paris Principles. We engage in various forms of technical cooperation and capacity building to strengthen these structures, including through our external action. We encourage and facilitate exchanges with and among partner human rights institutions, promoting peer learning, sharing of best practices and experiences, as well as building strong networks. The EU collaborates with international and regional human rights bodies, most notably UN human rights treaty bodies and special procedures and the Council of Europe, to align efforts and empower national structures to function more effectively, ensure accountability, and uphold human rights standards. We would like to ask the panelists, How can the role of civil society be strengthened to reinforce national human rights structures? Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Portugal to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Group of Friends of National Mechanisms for Implementation, Reporting and Follow-up, which Portugal has the honor to chair. Since 2017, the Group of Friends has been advocating for the role of NMIRFs in contributing to states' efforts to fulfill their human rights obligations, including for the implementation of recommendations of human rights bodies and mechanisms. NMIRFs promote better internal coordination and dialogue, including with national human rights institutions and civil society, fostering its participation and engagement. They are flexible and versatile entities, assuming different structures to suit specific national needs. The International Network of NMIRFs, established in 2024, is a platform for dialogue and exchange of best practices aimed at encouraging the creation of NMIRFs, strengthening capacities, sharing national experiences, and promoting partnerships and cooperation among its members and its international human rights system. The Group of Friends encourages states to establish or to continue to strengthen their mechanisms, including through digital tracking databases, taking into consideration the Marrakesh guidance framework, and taking advantage of the opportunities that multilateral and bilateral cooperation can offer. We encourage states to consider joining the international network of NMIRFs to benefit from the opportunities that this platform offers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Ghana to speak on behalf of the African group.
Thank you, Mr. President. The African group emphasizes the important and constructive role played by the national institutions in the promotion and protection of human rights through their advisory function to the competent authorities and through their role in addressing human rights violations and disseminating information on human rights. The African group recalls that technical assistance is an excellent way to empower states to fulfill their obligation and commitment in the field of training and protection of human rights, and that the strengthening of national capacities promotes inclusive dialogue and improves the implementation of the recommendations of the Council's mechanisms, including the UPR, special procedures, and treaty bodies. Finally, for the African group, technical cooperation and capacity building in the field of human rights must consider the challenges and priorities of the beneficiary states and be guided by the principles of objectivity, transparency, accountability, neutrality, and respect for sovereignty in order to ensure their effectiveness and sustainability. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Bahrain to speak on behalf of the Arab group.
Shukran.
Thank you, Vice President. We are glad to deliver this statement on behalf of the Arab group. Firstly, we thank the panelists for their valuable presentation. We underscore that technical cooperation should be based on genuine dialogue and partnership, and it should be a tool to build capacities of states to live up to their human rights international obligations in line with their priorities and needs. Vice President, our group considers that cooperation with the UNHRC and UN bodies and international partners further the contribution of national human rights institutions and support the national implementation mechanisms on the basis of practices agreed upon internationally. Our group stresses the need to provide sustainable funding for technical support cooperation so that the OHCR meet countries' requests in a manner that is not selective. In closing, we express our support to the good practices that ensued from this meeting, and we look forward to further cooperation with all partners in order to reinforce the capacity of states to reinforce human rights further. Thank you, Vice President.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Trinidad and Tobago to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the CARICOM group in Geneva. We express our thanks for the reflections at the start relating to the OHCHR report on the role of technical cooperation and capacity building in strengthening national structures, and also express our appreciation to the panelists for their insightful contributions today. Against the backdrop of an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape, coupled with shrinking multilateral budgets, we highlight the critical role of technical cooperation and capacity building in SIDS such as ours, the climate and development-related vulnerabilities compounding existing resource constraints. Our region also reiterates the need for innovative and targeted approaches to technical cooperation and capacity building. The value of the OHCHR Caribbean Regional Office, therefore, cannot be overstated, as it provides a sound basis for heightened engagement and collaboration on human rights, nationally, regionally, and in the broader multilateral context. We also encourage building on existing multi-agency collaborations with organizations such as the Commonwealth Secretariat and with academic institutions. Two examples are the jointly organized OHCHR Commonwealth Caribbean Workshop on Reporting Capacities and National Mechanisms held in Barbados in 2023, and the OHCHR Regional Office's engagement with legal students at the University of the Bahamas in February 2025. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Kuwait to speak on behalf of the GCC.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس. تقدر دول مجلس.
Thank you, Vice President. We highly value this panel and we welcome the panelists. We stress the great importance of technical cooperation and capacity building in enforcing and protecting human rights. We underscore that providing this support should be on the basis of the request and consent of the countries, given its importance to the countries to live up to their international human rights obligation in line with their needs, priorities, and their specific national context. We have worries over the liquidity problem facing the OHCHR. These challenges could undermine the ability of the OHCR to meet the increasing demand on technical support. It's sad that this might impact issues like the electronic platform on technical support. Our countries support the OHCHR's role in supporting countries to build their national capacities in the field of human rights. In closing, we call for further regional cooperation and partnership between countries that build on the expertise of international bodies as per need and circumstances of all parties. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Malaysia to speak on behalf of ASEAN.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of ASEAN member states and Timor-Leste. ASEAN reaffirms its support for the Council's work under Agenda Item 10. We remain committed to technical cooperation and capacity building as essential tools, including for strengthening national human rights structures which are critical to fulfilling international human rights obligations and ensuring effective protection on the ground. ASEAN's regional efforts reflect this commitment. In March 2024, the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, ICHR, convened a workshop in Vientiane to exchange best practices on the implementation of international treaties to which all ASEAN member states are parties. The workshop brought together representatives from governments, NMIRFs, NHRIs, OHCHR, civil society, and international partners. This workshop was part of the ICHR's five-year work plan aimed at strengthening the implementation of international human rights treaty obligations by ASEAN member states. Mr. President, we encourage further support through South-South, North-South, and triangular cooperation in line with the principles of consent and mutual respect. We also underscore the importance of sustainable, tailored, and demand-driven assistance that takes into account the diverse national context of states. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Mozambique to speak on behalf of CPLP.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The community of Portuguese-speaking countries made up of Angola, Brazil, Cabo Verde, Guiné-Bissau, Guiné Equatorial, Mozambique, Portugal, São Tomé e Príncipe, Timor-Leste welcomes the organization of this thematic panel. The CPLP recognized technical cooperation and capacity building as essential tools for institutional development, the promotion of good governance, and effective implementation of international human rights obligations. In this context, we emphasize the importance of complementarity between national human rights institutions and the national implementation, reporting and follow-up mechanisms, and of coordination between the different national actors in the consolidation of national human rights systems. The CPLP reaffirms the importance of South-South cooperation and the sharing of good practices between its members as an effective way of promoting sustainable solutions adapted to local contexts. However, it recognized that limited resources, structural difficulties, and adverse social economic contexts are obstacles to getting the best out of this cooperation. In closing, we reaffirm our commitment to continue working with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioners for Human Rights and other partners to strengthen resilient, effective, and inclusive national structures for the protection and promotion of human rights in the Lusophone space and beyond. We thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to China to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Mr. Vice President, it is my honor to speak on behalf of 70 countries. To build an accessible environment is a symbol of progress of human civilization and an important guarantee for human rights for all. Artificial intelligence holds tremendous potential to foster an accessible environment. We should uphold the principle of consultation, joint contribution, and share benefits to strengthen capacity building and technical assistance in AI for accessibility and promote sharing the benefit of AI advancement to all. First, we must uphold people-centered approach. We should actively develop AI technologies and applications for accessibility, ensuring that AI systems fully respect, promote, and protect human rights, empower sustainable development. Second, to pursue universal benefit and inclusion to ensure the benefits of AI reach all groups, including persons with disabilities, older persons, women, and children, and to promote equal and inclusive development. Third, we must enhance technical cooperation for mutual benefit to strengthen collaboration on AI for accessibility with a special call to provide financial and technical assistance to developing countries. Through concerted efforts, we must improve the global governance on AI. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we congratulate on the successful holding of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Gambia to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. I'm pleased to deliver the following statement on behalf of a group of states. The full list of countries supporting this statement, as well as the full version of the text, will be made available on the extranet. An important part of this Council's mandate is to secure accountability for human rights violations and justice for the victims. In order to fulfill this mandate, the Council has at its disposal a wide variety of mechanisms, procedures, and tools, including investigative mechanisms, communications procedures, country-specific and thematic resolutions, and special procedure mandates and special sessions. Notwithstanding the important work and contribution of these mechanisms, procedures, and tools, the sponsors of this statement are convinced that more should be done to prioritize the rights, perspectives, hopes, and needs of victims. We believe this Council's accountability work should place greater emphasis on realizing victims' right to remedy, redress, and reparation. Restorative justice, such as truth-telling, memorialization, community-based reconciliation efforts, and reparations financing should, we believe, be more centrally integrated into the accountability mandates and work of this Council. As noted by Pablo de Greve, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Truth, Justice, Reparations, and Non-Recurrence, in his 2014 report to the General Assembly, despite significant progress at the normative level, most victims still do not receive any reparation.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Samoa to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Samoa is honored to deliver this joint statement on behalf of a group of Pacific Islands. Due to limited financial and human resources and competing priorities, we are faced with implementation gaps in our human rights commitments as well as reporting fatigue. We have sought to narrow this gap and alleviate this reporting burden by establishing NMRFs and creating the Pacific Principles of Practice that was endorsed by our countries in 2020. The Pacific Principles of Practice was developed by the Pacific and for the Pacific. The first such document that provides guidance for Pacific Island countries on a strategic, coordinated, and holistic approach for the implementation and monitoring of progress of human rights obligations, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the National Development Plans. We recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to NMRFs. However, through the Pacific Principles of Practice, we propose that NMRFs should be a permanent mechanism and should have a clear structure, mandate, and sufficiently resourced to effectively coordinate human rights implementation and overlapping frameworks. We value peer-to-peer learning and appreciate the national, regional, and international workshops that have convened on NMRFs to foster a meaningful exchange on best practices and promotion of partnerships. To conclude, we commend the ongoing efforts of NMRFs across the region and welcome targeted support and continued collaboration with OHCHR and development partners on capacity building and the development and improvement of digital tools to support the work of the NMRFs in the region. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Cape Verde to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Ms. Vice President, I have the honor to lead the joint statement on behalf of the 10 beneficiary delegates supported by LDC Seeds Trust Fund to participate in the 50th session of the Council. We reiterate our strong support to the Council dedicated agenda item on technical assistance and capacity building. Technical cooperation plays a vital role in strengthening national structures and leaving lasting impact on the implementation of states' human rights obligations. It also enables coordination and collaboration to maximize the use of limited resources. The support provided through the Trust Fund has been instrumental in facilitating meaningful participation of the LDCs and SEEDS member states in the work of the Council. Mr. Vice President, we, beneficiary delegates, wish to express our sincere appreciation for the Trust Fund's valuable contribution. We thank the contributing member states and observers for their generous support, and we also commend the Secretariat for its continued assistance through the 15th night session. Furthermore, we acknowledge the importance of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights in implementing its mandate activities related to the technical cooperation and capacity building. In closing, we encourage all member states and observers to continue and enhance this support to this important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Morocco to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. It's an honor for me to make the statement on behalf of the Executive Committee of the network, Paraguay, Portugal, and Morocco. Set up in 2024 with the Asunción Declaration, the network is committed to developing an NMIRF through exchanging experience and cooperation. We have 24 founding members, and we are working to consolidate good practice, capacity building, and building tools. The executive is currently working on its first action plan for the networks, which will be adopted at the 3rd International NMIRF seminar, and this will attempt to support cooperation and expand membership. The network welcomes the membership of all UN member states, including those that do not have NMIRFs, who may join as observers. Technical cooperation remains central to this vision. We welcome and, in fact, further encourage the support from OHCHR, UN funds, programs, agencies, and country teams, as well as bilateral partners, in order to set up the follow-up systems. We also welcome cooperation carried out among states, and we call for stronger integration of strategies to support the establishment and development of NMIRFs and UN country programming.
Floor to Dominican Republic to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Señor Vicepresidente.
Thank you, Vice President. It's an honor for me to make the statement on behalf of an informal group of small island developing states. The unabridged version of this statement can be found on the internet. Now, despite climate vulnerability, limited resources and obstacles in obtaining access to financing for development, SIDS have shown a firm commitment to fulfilling our human rights obligations. We have invested efforts, creativity and political will to strengthen our national capacities. As part of this, our NMIRFs, as well as national human rights institutions, have been essential. Technical cooperation in all of its forms, be it bilateral, multilateral, South-South, or triangular, have been a key pillar. When it is sensitive to our context and aligned with our priorities, this becomes a powerful tool to bring about change. We therefore respectfully call on the Council and its partners to support the modernization of our national mechanisms, to promote learning from peers, and to guarantee constant technical assistance with foreseeable resources that allow us to move forward autonomously and in an ongoing manner. SIDS are committed to active multilateralism, which is also significant, inclusive and effective. We have to invest in our national human rights institutions, and if we do so, it'll mean that nobody will be left behind. Thank you.
Now I will turn to the list of speakers for national human rights institutions and the non-governmental organizations. And the first give the floor to CCIG for a joint statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. CCIG, on behalf of this NGO coalition, welcomes the very relevant theme of this panel discussion and the valuable contributions provided by
Interpreters apologize. Sound quality is too poor for interpretation.
Systems for implementation, reporting, and follow-up play a key role in ensuring protection of human rights by contributing to the implementation of UPR and other human rights bodies' recommendation. While we recognize the progress states have made so far, we stress the need for a more systematic evaluation of the implementation status of recommendations at the local level. Therefore, we call upon member states to set up or strengthen NMIRF and to develop a human rights monitoring plan in order to enhance the implementation of UPR recommendations and ultimately to better human rights for all worldwide. Accordingly, we highlight how the following minimum requirements should be guaranteed for these mechanisms to be truly effective. 1. Strong governmental anchoring. The mechanism should be linked to a high-level office with the authority to coordinate across sectors. It should include representatives from key ministries, local governments, parliament, and the judiciary. 2. Permanent resource structure. It should be a permanent body built in existing structures with dedicated staff and funding. 3. Mandate to consult with civil society and NHRI as the main partners for the monitoring and implementation of UPR recommendations. 4. Training and grassroots for government officers to ensure better understanding on the importance to effectively implement UPR recommendations at the local level. Thank you.
Now, Maloka International.
Vice President, we wish to seize the opportunity offered by this panel to emphasize the possibility of extending technical or to highlight the information of using technical cooperation in occupied territories such as Western Sahara, which is under an illegal occupation by the Kingdom of Morocco, where there is no mandate for any UN body to do any human rights follow-up. We know that it is the will of the states which is essential to bring about technical cooperation. And here we draw attention to the example of Colombia, where the country asked for UN support. And we have to have greater focus on the murder of human rights defenders. We ask for these efforts to be stepped up thanks to more active technical cooperation, both for Colombia and for other contexts, where the protection of fundamental human rights requires constant and upscaled attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Now a video statement by Beijing Global Talent Exchange Association.
Dear distinguished delegates, my name is Liang Qun, Secretary General of the Beijing Global Talent Exchange Association. It's a great honor to speak at this panel. We believe technical cooperation and capacity building are important for human rights, especially when facing global challenges like climate change, public health, and so on. Our organization works to promote international communication and to connect young professionals from different countries to learn, grow, and build on mutual understanding. Based on our work, I'd like to share 3 suggestions. First, technical cooperation should be people-centered, focus on basic needs like education, public health, and the environment. Second, civil society organizations can act as bridge. We work closely with local communities, understand the language and the culture, and help turn international efforts into sustainable outcomes. Third, we should build a fair and inclusive global talent exchange system. At the same time, we should learn from developed countries and those with strong technical cooperation experience to improve our own capacity and create more chance for young people in developing regions. We are ready to work with the UN and the global partners for a better future.
International Bar Association, a video intervention.
National Bar Association, Human Rights Institute, and Ukrainian Bar Association welcome the report of the High Commission on the role of technical cooperation and capacity building. In Ukraine, the large-scale disruption caused by Russia's war of aggression has severely impacted numerous sectors, including the justice system. Since February 2022, nearly 10% of court infrastructure has been damaged, and close to 20% of courts have been forced to shut down. Despite these obstacles, the Ukrainian justice system has demonstrated notable resilience, continuing to operate under conditions of severe financial constraints and frequent interruptions to regular judicial proceedings. At the same time, ongoing challenges to the realization of social and economic rights resulting from the war are significantly undermined transitional justice efforts. Destruction of infrastructure, forced displacement, widespread unemployment, and economic instability, alongside restricted access to basic services and worsening of mental health conditions, have deepened existing inequalities and delayed economic recovery and have complicated reform efforts. We call on this Council to enhance support for Ukraine, in particular justice institutions, justice reform, and accountability efforts through technical cooperation. We specifically call for increased technical assistance, capacity building, and financial support to ensure the sustainability and independence of Ukraine's judicial institutions. We also encourage targeted support to strengthen prosecutorial and investigative capacities, particularly in the documentation and adjudication of war crime cases. Thank you.
Human Rights Information and Training Center, intervention by video.
السيد الرئيس، نرحب بحلقة النقاش هذه.
Vice President, we welcome holding of this meeting. We are aware of the importance of technical assistance and capacity building in order to promote and protect human rights. However, in Yemen, we note that despite support, the country faces many challenges because of the violations committed by the Houthi. We believe there's a national commission is to the detriment of other bodies which play important roles in monitoring violations. So the assistance you provide must be broadened to make sure that national mechanisms receive sufficient support so they can fulfill their mandate. We support technical assistance to national mechanisms because they're in the front line of providing support. We would like to see additional support for these mechanisms, particularly in terms of their judicial capacities, and there must be support for civil society so that they can play their role and provide assistance and aid to victims. There must be revised budgets for technical assistance and capacity building for human rights bodies. Thank you.
Somebody Trust, intervention by video.
Thank you, Mr. President. We welcome this important discussion on technical cooperation and capacity building in human rights. Strengthening national structures, including human rights institutions and reporting mechanisms, is vital to protect all, especially marginalized groups. These systems must be inclusive, transparent, and accessible to women, children, and persons with disabilities, ensuring their voices are heard at every level. Sambhali Trust, based in Jodhpur, India, has been working for 18 years to empower more than 75,000 Dalit tribal, and marginalized women and girls. Through education, vocational training, gender rights, awareness, and access to legal and health services, Sambhali builds local capacities to claim rights and access justice. We have established community-based support centers that assist survivors of violence and discrimination in navigating available human rights mechanisms and services and make them technical friendly. Mr. President, India has also taken commendable steps by strengthening its National Human Rights Commission and state commissions and through initiatives like the Accessible India Campaign and National Action Plan for Human Rights. These efforts aim to make human rights services inclusive and more accessible to disadvantaged groups. We respectfully appeal to the United Nations and member states to enhance technical cooperation with grassroots organizations, ensuring that human rights mechanisms are accessible, inclusive, and effectively reach the most marginalized. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we have exhausted the first segment of the list of speakers, and we will now proceed with the second segment of the list of speakers. And the first speaker on my list in this segment is El Salvador. You have the floor.
Gracias. Thank you, Vice President. El Salvador welcomes the holding of this panel, and we recognize the importance of technical cooperation and capacity building to promote and protect human rights, especially in developing countries. Technical cooperation, when it is sustainable, foreseeable, and delivered in favorable conditions, is essential to strengthen national human rights mechanisms, including national mechanisms for implementing reporting and follow-up. We have been strengthening our national capacity through a cooperation with UN agencies and others, and ensuring our policies are in line with global necessities, but adapted to local needs. We believe global cooperation is an essential pillar, and we have a particular focus on technical cooperation in assisting states to comply with their human rights obligations. This is why there must be sustainable, accessible financial resources which allow for long-term results and investment. We reiterate our commitment to strengthening national capacities and global cooperation, and we are ready and willing to work with other states to put in place inclusive policies that foster human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Vice President, the Russian Federation has consistently spoken out against politicization of technical cooperation, the exchange of information and cutting-edge experience between interested states and UN bodies. We insist on preserving unbiased, depoliticized discussions on the corresponding agenda items. We believe that the priorities are vital in considering technical cooperation in the human rights dimension of the UN's activities. We should not be considering issues that go beyond rendering assistance to capacity building in countries in human rights, boosting their sustainability as they face human rights challenges. Such assistance should be furnished to interested states exclusively on their request and with their consent, without any preconditions, and taking into account the national conditions, requirements, and priorities. The use of technical cooperation as justification for inclusion in the agenda of topics that do not fall under the Human Rights Council mandate, and also exploitation of it in order to interfere in the domestic affairs of sovereign states, is absolutely unacceptable. We remain convinced that the issue of problems related to technical cooperation has the potential to bring us together and can bring states and peoples together to pool their efforts. However, achieving practical results in this area requires consolidating our common efforts in order to have a genuine dialogue.
Cuba.
Thank you, Vice President. Respectful dialogue, technical assistance without interference, and cooperation are the only effective ways to promote and protect human rights in any nation. So we recognize that technical cooperation and capacity building are effective tools that go hand in hand with national efforts to implement their human rights commitments. For example, Since its participation in the fourth UPR cycle in 2023, we have put in place technical exchanges and effective cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and other universal human rights mechanisms that are non-discriminatory, so that we could implement the recommendations we accepted as part of the fourth cycle. These actions have helped us to perfect our institutional and legal framework in the country to help us promote human rights. The real success of technical cooperation is not about multiplying external models and applying them to the country, but it's assisting countries in full respect of their sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the Lao PDR.
Vice President, my delegation welcomes the holding of this panel discussion and allies itself with statements of the groups it belongs to. The LAPDR emphasizes the importance of the technical assistance and capacity building in the field of human rights for member states in need to strengthen national capacities, to fulfill their human rights obligations and commitments, to ensure the promotion and protection of human rights at the country level. We firmly believe that the technical assistance and capacity building should be provided in consultation with and at the request of the states concerned, in accordance with their national priorities and needs, and based on the mutual respect and genuine dialogue and cooperation. The LAPDR highly appreciate the continued cooperation of OHCHR, UN agencies, and other international organizations and their partners in supporting human rights endeavors of the LAPDR over the past year. Taking this opportunity, we express our special thanks to the UN Voluntary Fund for financial and technical assistance in preparation and participation in the fourth cycle GPR of our country. On this note, we encourage member states, UN partners, and those in a position to continue making financial contribution to the UN Voluntary Fund in order to support states' efforts in the promotion and protection of human rights. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Mr. President. Timor-Leste aligns itself with the statement made on behalf of the CPLP, ASEAN, and the group of friends of NMIR, and welcome these important discussions on the role of technical cooperation in strengthening national human rights systems. Timor-Leste has placed human rights as its core of its nation building. With the strong support from OHCHR, we established our national human rights institutions, Provedoria de Direitos Humanos e Justiça, which continue to play a key role in promoting accountability and inclusion. We recognize that sustaining human rights progress requires continued investment in capacity building, national ownership, and coordination among all actors, including civil society. We call for a stronger support for small and developing states to further enhance their institutional framework, particularly through South-South and triangular cooperation. Timor-Leste remains committed to deepening our partnership and sharing lessons learned with others working to build resilient human rights-based societies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now a video statement by the Council of Europe.
Thank you. The Council of Europe actively supports states in upholding international and European standards through general and issue-specific capacity building of their national institutions. This includes providing tailored human rights trainings and legal expertise on institutional reforms and policy development. For instance, the European Forum on National Preventive Mechanisms facilitates dialogue among European bodies responsible for the prevention of torture. It also strengthens the exchange of promising practices to tackle systemic challenges such as prison overcrowding and immigration detention monitoring. Council of Europe also supports institutions in Ukraine in aligning with European human rights standards related to military service. This entails legal harmonization, training, and policy support to protect veterans and reinforce social protection. Across different national contexts, the organization works on strengthening awareness of the mandate of national human rights institutions, fostering cooperation with civil society, and improving procedures for individual complaints, investigations, and monitoring mechanisms. The overall focus is always on adherence to international standards, including the Venice Principles, to ensure the independence and effectiveness of national human rights institutions. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Chile values the work of OHCHR and its office very highly to strengthen national capacity. Well, technical cooperation here has been very important for us to consolidate bodies such as the Undersecretariat for Human Rights and the recently established coordinating body, which is going to work as our national mechanism for implementing reporting and follow-up. And this is in a bid to comply with our international human rights obligations. At the same time, we recognize the support of OHCHR and the support they offered when we went through the UPR system, and they helped foster civil society participation. There was, for example, a technical seminar on budgetary planning, focusing on economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. And this was held at the end of May. It was an activity organized together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Treasury and OHCHR. We welcome these opportunities for cooperation, and we share the High Commissioner's recommendations to promote national human rights mechanisms to strengthen cooperation with the UN system and to have greater exchanges bilaterally and regionally and multilaterally. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Jamaican delegation thanks the OHCHR for the reports contained in HRC/59/65 and the panelists for their contributions. The establishment of an NHRI in Jamaica is under review. Notwithstanding the efforts underway in that regard, several entities currently play key roles in protecting human rights, including the Office of the Children's Advocate, the Independent Commission of Investigations, and the Office of the Public Defender. These institutions operate under broad constitutional or legal mandates and function independently from both the state and the government. In particular, the Office of the Public Defender is responsible for investigating allegations of constitutional breaches and maladministration lodged by individuals against public or statutory bodies. The Interministerial Committee on Human Rights, IMCHR, serves as a forum for the coordination of reporting and follow-up on Jamaica's treaty body reporting obligations, while not considered an MIRF. The interplay between the IMCHR and other national structures include the cabinet-mandated membership of representations from the latter on the IMCHR, as well as opportunities for engagement with civil society actors. Jamaica supports the call for adequate funding to ensure the effective implementation of technical cooperation and capacity building activities. In this regard, my delegation is keen on exploring the avenues for technical cooperation for countries like Jamaica, who are currently pursuing the development of an NHRI. We align with a statement delivered on behalf of CARICOM. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Qatar.
بالرئيس في البدء يؤكد وفد بلادي على أهمية التعاون الفني.
Thank you, Vice President. At the outset, my country reaffirms the importance of technical cooperation and capacity building to assist national human rights institutions and other such bodies to expand their abilities to protect and promote human rights. We insist that these two areas of activities should be executed in the light of national and regional requirements and specificities. We reaffirm the importance of protecting all rights, social, economic, cultural, political, including the right to development. However, this should be done in an equal manner and in the framework of an objective dialogue and positive cooperation. At the same time, Qatar wishes to promote its own cooperation with the Human Rights Council, boosting technical cooperation and capacity building. We have rendered all necessary support to create UN bodies at Doha and other agencies with a cooperation center, which is the appropriate way of doing this. It brings together all stakeholders and engages them in technical cooperation in many different areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Malawi.
Mr. Vice President, Malawi aligns with the statement of the African Group and thanks the panelists for their insightful contributions, which reaffirm the importance of technical cooperation and capacity building in strengthening national human rights structures. We welcome the OHCHR report and echo its emphasis on empowering national human rights institutions and national mechanisms for implementing, reporting, and following up. These institutions are essential in translating international human rights commitments into tangible progress at the national level. Malawi has benefited from international support in enhancing capacity building for UNHRC and NMIRF. However, challenges such as limited funding, technical expertise, and coordination do persist. We urge continued and targeted assistance to address these gaps, ensuring our institutions remain independent, effective, and responsive. We call for strengthened partnerships between states, the OHCHR, and other stakeholders to foster sustainable capacity building. Let us work together to ensure these structures can fully uphold their mandates in promoting and protecting human rights. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Egypt.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس. يرحب وفد مصر بانعقاد النقاش الثانوي وتركيزه على دور التعاون الفني في دعم المؤسسات.
We hail the holding of this meeting, and we stress the need to have an integrated national human rights network that is based on complementarity between government institutions responsible for its commitment and national human rights in order to implement the human rights obligations continuously and with transparency. Egypt was keen to achieve cooperation between various stakeholders, including Human Rights Committee in charge of coordinating government efforts in reporting and recommendation follow-up with the National Human Rights Council as an independent institution that is accredited according to Paris principles. This cooperation led to constant exchange of information with regards to human rights culture and international commitment, and coordinating with regards to national plans, including the National Human Rights Strategy 2021. In closing, we stress that technical support take into account national priorities, and thank you very much, Vice President.
I give the floor to China.
副主席先生，人权技术援助和能力建设是人权理事会的一项重要任务，可以对一国人权事业发挥建设性作用。中方欢迎人权理事会就此举行专题研讨会，希望人权理事会和
and hope that the HRC and the OHCHR will continue to strengthen their efforts and to provide practical assistance to countries in need.
To restart because there was no interpretation in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, 副主席先生。
Vice President, technical assistance and capacity building are an important task of the HRC and can play a constructive role in a country's human rights cause. China welcomes this thematic panel discussion by the Council and hopes that the HRC and the OHCHR will strengthen efforts in this area and provide practical assistance to the countries concerned, respecting the will and the sovereignty of the countries concerned, consulting fully with them are primary principles for providing technical assistance and building capacity. All countries should be free to choose their own development paths, including the mechanisms they establish to promote and protect human rights. Values and development models must not be imposed, nor used as a pretext to establish country-specific mechanisms unrelated to technical assistance and capacity building or interfere in internal affairs. At the same time, technical assistance and capacity building must cater to the national conditions and needs of each country. This is important to uphold a people-centered approach and act in the fundamental interests of the people and place greater emphasis on the right to survival and development and give equal importance to economic, social, and cultural rights so as to make due contribution to advancing international human rights cause. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor to Georgia.
Vice President,
Today's discussion gives us an opportunity to once again underscore the importance of national structures in safeguarding human rights. In this vein, the Interagency Human Rights Council in Georgia, serving as a national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, plays a key role in elaborating and implementing a united human rights state policy. Council reviews and coordinates implementation of the recommendations of the Parliament of Georgia and the Public Defender of Georgia, UN treaty bodies, the UPR, and UN special procedures. The IHRC formally engaged with the UN mechanism, including the treaty bodies and special procedures, by coordinating the implementation of their recommendations across relevant ministries. Additionally, the Public Defender of Georgia collaborates with the IHRC in developing and implementing national action plans on human rights. The IHRC is also mandated to review and coordinate the implementation of recommendations issued by the Public Defender. In conclusion, I would like to once again reaffirm Georgia's commitment to promoting and safeguarding human rights, including through the strengthening of national structures. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Zambia aligns with the African Group statement. We welcome this panel and thank the panelists for sharing their insightful experiences. Technical cooperation and capacity building are essential pillars in the promotion and protection of human rights. Zambia continues to receive support to the local UN office, which strengthens our National Human Rights Commission and helps build capacity and improve coordination of our national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-ups. We underscore the importance of innovative solutions to ensure adequate and sustainable funding for technical cooperation and for continued support for national and regional human rights efforts. In particular, we call for increased support for the LDC Trust Fund, which provides essential assistance for small delegations. In closing, we reiterate our support for the OHCHR and other partners that contribute to multilateral efforts for technical assistance and capacity building in the field of human rights. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegates. We will now turn to the list of speakers for NHRIs and NGOs. The first on my list is a video intervention by Americans for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain.
Mr. President, we welcome this panel focus on technical cooperation and capacity building. However, in many countries, such efforts remain ineffective without the meaningful inclusion of independent civil society. Despite repeated OHCHR mission, human rights violations in the Gulf countries persist. Throughout the Arabian Gulf, there is no space for independent civil society. Organizations and activists are systematically persecuted for opposing their governments. Exiled civil society activists have faced ongoing reprisals for their advocacy, including prison sentences issued in absentia, denaturalization, surveillance, and retaliation against their families. State-appointed oversight bodies, such as the Ombudsman and the various national institutions for human rights, serve largely symbolic roles. Rather than upholding rights, they whitewash abuses, protect perpetrators, and often portray victims as offenders. Many families of political prisoners state that they submitted multiple complaints to these bodies, but these efforts consistently fail to produce any results. We urge the OHCHR to establish clear conditions for further capacity building missions. No such mission should proceed without independent civil society, including exiled defenders, at least as observers under UN auspices, to ensure credibility and help and impunity. Thank you.
Shanxi Patriotic Volunteer Association intervention by video.
陕西爱国志愿者协会 I speak on behalf of the International Patriotic Pact Organization. We have had the support from 150 NGOs from 50 countries. We are committed to evaluate development of countries. Through our practice, we can assess the achievements of the countries to promote international cooperation, to safeguard national development rights and advance global peace. In the context of globalization, technical cooperation and capacity building are pivotal for countries to enhance governance and fulfill their international human rights obligations. Technical cooperation enables the sharing of experiences and improve the efficiency of human rights institutions. Capacity building can focus on cultivating talents and to engage in international cooperation. In 2024, we have held a China's contribution to the 2030 SDG seminar, which not only showcased China's contribution to humanity in the course of its national development, but also foster international communication and cooperation. Faced with the shortage of funds, we call for strengthened cooperation and partnership to jointly build a just international order. We will continue to refine our discussion mechanism, deepen technical cooperation, assist countries in building a community with a shared future for mankind. Thank you.
Now, RSKS, a video intervention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Myself, Tarangini from RSKS India. It is an honor to speak today. We welcome this vital discussion on how technical cooperation and capacity building can strengthen national human rights systems. National human rights institutions and NMIRFs are key pillars of a country's human rights system. With strong technical support, they better deliver justice, protect the marginalized, and uphold accountability. We appreciate the efforts of UNHRC and partner states in providing tools, knowledge, and resources to support these structures. Technical cooperation, when done in consultation and partnership with the concerned state, not only builds capacity but also fosters trust and long-term progress. It allows national institutions to translate international commitments into real change for people on the ground. Mr. President, however, many countries still face challenges such as limited resources, lack of training, or gaps in coordination. Therefore, we call for stronger collaboration. Local civil society organizations should also be actively included as they provide valuable insight and community level experience. Digital tools like the online repository of technical cooperation must be expanded and made accessible, especially for developing countries. Transparency, inclusiveness, and shared learning will ensure technical cooperation is not just a policy but a lived, effective practice. We thank you. May all live happily.
Now, OIPMA.
Mr. Vice President, OIPMA draws the Council's attention to the urgent need to address the growing technical cooperation and capacity building among terrorist and extremist groups, an increasingly transnational threat that jeopardizes peace, security, and development worldwide. Recent reports highlight deepening ties between the Houthi militia in Yemen and the Al-Shabaab in Somalia, including exchanges of weaponry and tactical expertise. These developments pose a direct threat to maritime security in the Red Sea and risk destabilizing one of the world's most vital trade corridors. In the Sahel, extremist groups continue to deepen cooperation. Boko Haram has strengthened its operational capabilities through alignment with ISIS and links to Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, improving coordination, recruitment, and propaganda strategies. These groups benefit from shared resources, training, and funding, often adapting faster than international responses. OIPMA calls for urgent, unified global action. We urge the Human Rights Council and relevant UN bodies to prioritize technical cooperation and capacity building with affected LDCs, supporting national and regional efforts to prevent, detect, and dismantle extremist networks. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. We have thus exhausted the second segment of the list of speakers. Excellencies, dear participants, this was the last speaker we could accommodate. Delegates inscribed on the list of speakers who could not take floor due to time constraints can upload their statements to be posted on the extranet. I will now give the floor back to the panelists for their concluding remarks. You have 2 minutes each. Now I give the floor to Her Excellency, Madam Uzana Berananda. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would like to close by echoing the sentiment shared by not only the panelists, but from the delegates from the floor as well, that technical cooperation and capacity building, when conducted with consent of country concerned and with mutual respect, it remains a very useful, pragmatic, and constructive tools in the Council's toolbox, because it takes into account country-specific problem, the needs, and their priorities, and it creates a sense of ownership. Because in a lot of cases, states cannot fulfill their human rights obligation, not because they don't want to or they are not willing to do so, but because they don't have capacity to implement all those applications. So technical cooperation and capacity building will be crucial. I would like to quickly respond to the point raised by the EU delegation on the role of civil society organization. Yes, the CSO has a crucial role to play. They can help enhance and strengthen the work of the National Human Rights Institution in both implementing their promotion and protection mandate. And in many cases, the civil society organization directly provide technical assistance to the National Human Rights Institution. For example, in the case of Thailand, the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand received technical cooperation from the Association for the Prevention of Torture in developing guidelines and checklists for conducting visits to detention facilities. So that help us fulfill our mandate and obligations under the CAT Convention. So that's one of the example of the role of the civil society organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mario Raul Cano Ricciardi. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much again, Vice President. Thank you very much, the panelists, and I want to thank as well the distinguished state by participating in this very important seminar. I want to extend my appreciation as well for the NGO and HRI mission, and I want to echo what has been mentioned by my colleague, the technical cooperation and capacity building and the participation of the NGO and the social society are key in order to strengthen what is most important to strengthen the human rights under the United Nations system. We want to again echo the request and the concern and the insight of the participation in this very important seminar. We will take note, and one last thing, but certainly not the less important, the cooperation between the states are key, and doesn't matter the side of the country, what just matter, the national capacity to strengthen our human rights system. Thank you very much, Vice President. Thank you very much for the audience as well.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Madame Amina Boyach. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président. Je ne reprendrai pas.
Thank you very much, Vice President. I won't add the same response to the response of the previous speakers, but on behalf of GAMI, I would like to thank sincerely this body for all of the assistance that we have received, the accompaniment that we and National Human Rights Institutions have received, and would like to reiterate our commitment at GANRI to technical cooperation between UNDP and other UN bodies for this support for the 4 regional networks. I would like to say a few words as the president of a national human rights body. This also is a monitoring and reporting body in my country. And so as a monitoring mechanism, I would invite my co-citizens as representatives of Malcoa, the NGO, to read the report, the public reports that have been made available, submitted by the public authorities and published also in the Kingdom of Morocco's public bulletins. And this is important that they are accessible to the public. Monitoring is conducted also in the south with close cooperation with a Human Rights Council body. We do conduct monitoring and reporting in connection with these other bodies. We do consider complaints and communications, and so it is well worth and appropriate to read the annual reports that are published on monitoring and on those institutions responsible for monitoring. And so we have the courage to stand up and say what is working well and also what is not working perfectly, and to challenge the public authorities where it must be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Now I give the floor to Madam Sarah Aguas.
Thank you for giving me the floor. We also, from our side, appreciate all the interventions. I think there is a lot of commonality from what we heard today. I will maybe just very quickly identify 6 main takeaways. First, the role indeed that NMIRFs as permanent structures with clear mandates and high-level engagement can play in the promotion and protection of human rights. Second, we also recognize the potential for cooperation and complementarity of UNHRCs and NMIRFs, and the meaningful role that civil society should play in this regard. Third, we underline also the importance of sharing best practices and lessons learned. So we recognize a lot of work that has been done already, namely in documents such as the Marrakesh Guidance Framework, and also the expectation around the repository of good practices by the office. We also would like to make a point about the importance of peer-to-peer exchanges, the role of regional organizations and international platforms such as the International Network of NMIRFs. We also heard the need to ensure specific contexts and targeted assistance to foster ownership. For that reason, I think it's important also that UN country teams continue to incorporate technical cooperation and capacity building in their programs. We've heard a lot of concerns with the funding levels, that they are perhaps insufficient to meet demands. And so I think it is essential to ensure there is a coordinated approach and to avoid duplication, and also to maximize the impact of technical cooperation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, this brings us to the end of the annual thematic panel discussion on technical cooperation and capacity building. I wish to thank Mr. Cis Guro, our distinguished panelists, and all the panelists participants who have contributed to our discussion. We will now take a 1-minute break before proceeding with the interactive dialogue on the report of the High Commissioner on improving technical assistance and capacity building in Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we will now continue active dialogue on the report of the High Commissioner on improving technical assistance and capacity building in Colombia in accordance with Council Resolution 53/22. I now invite interested delegations to ask questions and make comments on the report that was presented yesterday. The speaking time is limited to 1 minute and 30 seconds for all. Then the first speaker on my list is European Union. You have the floor.
Much, Mr. Vice President. The European Union thanks the OHCHR for this report and for its important work in Colombia. The EU has been standing together with Colombia for over 2 decades on the journey towards lasting peace anchored in human rights. And we will continue to support the peace agreement and its implementation politically, technically, and financially. We commend Colombia's commitment to human rights and multilateralism and look forward to the CELAC EU summit in November. We welcome the OHCHR's support for the implementation of the recommendations from the Truth Commission and of the peace agreement overall. Despite many positive steps and undeniable goodwill, hurdles remain. The EU is concerned by killings of social leaders, human rights defenders, and signatories of the peace agreement, and by the persistence of impunity and obstacles to access to justice. To put an end to the cycle of violence, it is crucial to continue to address the underlying causes of the conflict, to ensure the full protection of human rights throughout Colombia, to build a culture of peace and dialogue, to ensure adequate support for the special jurisdiction for peace, and to integrate the agency of women and girls as well as individuals in a vulnerable situation. Mrs. Cojonen, what could be some of the main priorities for the Colombian government to focus on until the elections? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sweden, to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Nordic Baltic countries. We thank the High Commissioner for his latest report. We would also like to express our support for the work of the OHCHR in Colombia and highlight the importance of ensuring its funding. We commend Colombia for recognizing the urgent need for a comprehensive and integral implementation of the peace agreement from 2016 and its continued efforts towards sustainable and durable peace. However, former combatants, human rights defenders, and social leaders continue to face a dire security situation. We must recognize that this represents a threat to the peace agreement. We would also like to commend the work of the OHCHR within the area of security sector reform, as well as the Colombian government's cooperation in this regard. Lastly, we appreciate the support of the OHCHR to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, supporting its important work within transitional justice to ensure accountability for human rights violations and abuses. Director, in your view, what further support does Colombia need in order to continue the implementation of the peace agreement from 2016, considering the current security situation in the country? I thank you.
Thank you. Luxembourg, to speak on behalf of a group of countries.
Mr. Vice President, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of Belgium, the Netherlands, and my own country, Luxembourg. We fully align with the statement of the European Union and thank for the report. We commend the Office of the High Commissioner for the support provided to Colombia in the implementation of the peace agreement, while regretting that the liquidity situation has affected the OHCHR's capacity to carry out all the technical assistance mandated by this Council. We welcome the commitment of the government of Colombia to fulfill the recommendations by the Truth Commission and the progress made. However, we consider that stronger action is necessary to ensure its comprehensive implementation and that of the peace agreement. Especially the persistence of impunity surrounding cases of serious human rights violations and abuses, and the obstacles to justice are a challenge that needs to be addressed effectively and without delay. We remain concerned by the killing by non-state actors of social leaders and human rights defenders, among whom LGBTQI+ persons, by the increasing number of recruitment and use of children by non-state armed groups and organized crime, and the persistence of disproportionate violence against indigenous authorities, the Afro-Colombian community, members of community action committees, and campesino organizations. How can this Council and Member States further support Colombia in its efforts to ensure the full protection of human rights and in building a culture of peace and dialogue for conflict resolution? I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you for the floor.
New Zealand appreciates the report on the technical cooperation in Colombia. As a co-sponsor of the resolution that underpins this mandate, we express our full support for the findings and the recommendations contained. New Zealand commends the meaningful progress that Colombia has made and endorses the areas identified where continued support is needed. Technical assistance provided by the OHCHR has made a significant impact to date, and there is much potential to drive further meaningful progress towards the full implementation of the recommendations by the Truth Commission. However, we're concerned by the impact of the liquidity situation on the OHCHR's work with Colombia. Without adequate resourcing, these efforts risk stalling at a critical juncture. This report comes at a time when Colombia and its people need continued support from the international community. New Zealand is pleased to reaffirm our support for the implementation of the peace agreement through a recent contribution of 145,000 New Zealand dollars to the UN Multi-Partner Trust Funds for Sustaining Peace in Colombia. Alongside previous commitments, we hope this contribution will assist in reducing the human rights effects of conflict and help build lasting peaceful communities. High Commissioner, how can we and the rest of the international community help re-intensify efforts?
Now I give the floor to Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. Peru welcomes the presentation of the High Commissioner's report, and we recognize the support that's been given to Colombian authorities to implement the recommendations of the Truth Commission. We welcome the efforts being made by the State of Colombia to progress in implementing the recommendations made by the Commission and their commitment to transitional justice and a culture of peace. We also see that they're open to dialogue and to interinstitutional cooperation. We agree with the recommendation to undertake a root and branch reform of the protection system for defenders, and there should be differentiated gender, ethnic and territorial approaches, and we must see participation of civil society. We are concerned at the impact of budgetary restrictions and the impact it'll have on the operations of the OHCHR office in Colombia. At the moment, their presence is still necessary. We reiterate that we are ready and willing to cooperate with multilateralism and to boost efforts to strengthen capacities. We must have sustainable peace based on truth, justice, and non-repetition. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Austria aligns with the EU statement and reiterates its full support to the High Commissioner and OHCHR. We commend Colombia for recognizing the urgent need for a comprehensive and integral implementation of the 2016 peace agreement and welcome Colombia's cooperation with treaty bodies and special procedures, as illustrated by the recent visit of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances and the independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, to name just two examples. Turning political goodwill into tangible impact on the ground can be challenging. Therefore, we're particularly concerned that the UN's lacking financial resources have directly affected OHCHR's capacity to provide technical assistance in the 4 areas it identified in the Human Rights Council Resolution 5322. We welcome OHCHR's continued support to Colombia for the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission for the clarification of truth, coexistence, and non-repetition, including a comprehensive rule reform, security and justice, reparations, dismantling criminal organizations, undermining peace building, and advancing transitional justice. This support becomes even more important in the light of concerning reports on the killings of human rights defenders, the growing number of cases of forced recruitment, especially minors, as well as conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Chile wishes to thank the High Commissioner for the presentation of their report on strengthening technical cooperation and capacity building in order to support the implementation of recommendations of the Commission for Clarification of Truth, Coexistence and Non-Repetition. We recognize the efforts of the State of Colombia have been made towards lasting peace based on truth, justice, reparation, and we welcome the central role of the Truth Commission. We emphasize the need to implement the recommendations with an approach which is comprehensive and participative. The report highlights the key role of OHCHR in investigating human rights violations, reforming the security sector and protecting defenders. Given the current context, it's essential to step up efforts to fully implement the recommendations and to ensure sustainability of technical assistance, which is currently under threat due to budgetary restrictions. We welcome recommendations to strengthen institutional capacity to ensure victims are involved and to progress towards public policies that have differentiated approach on gender, ethnicity and territorial considerations. Chile will continue to support Colombia's efforts as part of international cooperation and the mandate of the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We commend Colombia's continued collaboration with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and welcome today's update. The human rights situation in Colombia remains challenging, as recognised by the UN Committee on Enforced Disappearances on its visit last December and the visit of the UN Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity in May. We are concerned at the increase in children being recruited by criminal groups to participate in the armed conflict. Moreover, violence based on sexual orientation and gender identity remains widespread. Human rights defenders, journalists, social and community leaders, as well as LGBT+ communities remain some of the most vulnerable. For the UK, the 2016 peace agreement is crucial to securing lasting peace in Colombia. Its implementation requires a whole-of-society approach. We continue to urge the Colombian government, civil society and UN agencies to work together on this important issue, particularly through technical cooperation and capacity building. We continue to call on the international community to strengthen its assistance to Colombian-led efforts to secure lasting peace, including through supporting an effective response to the recommendations of the Commission for the Clarification of Truth, Coexistence and Non-Repetition. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Spain.
Thank you very much, Vice President. We align ourselves with the statements made by the EU and we thank the High Commissioner for his report. We restate our commitment to the peace process in Colombia, and we're aware of the challenges that still exist and which were very eloquently laid out before us by the High Commissioner today. We commend Colombia for the progress that they've made towards building a fair, lasting peace founded on the respect of human rights and for the cooperation with UN mechanisms, including OHCHR, and with other international verification mechanisms such as the MAP. We support the work the office does on the ground and we regret the lack of resources which has led to the closing of 3 branches. We're concerned at the reports of recruitments and forced disappearances. These particularly affect indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, children, women, defenders and the LGBTI communities. It is essential to ensure their protection, to guarantee victims access to justice and reparation, and to ensure accountability for human rights violations and abuse. We remain willing to continue to support Colombia as it moves towards peace, a peace which is based on inclusion and equal rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now I give the floor to Honduras.
Thank you, Vice President. We wish to thank the Office of the High Commissioner for the presentation of their report, compliance with 5322 and 5614 resolutions, and we emphasize how important it is to continue supporting technical capacity. These are essential pillars to support states as they protect or attempt to protect all human rights. We recognize Colombia's efforts and the work of OHCHR in the country, and we welcome the strategic approach for a cooperation on security and protecting human rights defenders, and this must include a gender approach and meet the specific needs of people in a vulnerable situation. This must also respect sovereignty and the realities on the ground. We reiterate our commitment to multilateralism, building peace and transitional justice process, and we support OHCHR. We hope that necessary resources will be found so that the office can continue to do its essential work on the ground and provide technical assistance to Colombia so it can progress in implementing Truth Commission recommendations as part of the peace accords. To conclude, we restate our will to continue to contribute to dialogue and cooperation in respect of human rights and the dignity of all peoples. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dominican Republic.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Vice President. The Dominican Republic welcomes the report presented on Colombia, and we recognize the significant progress that's been made in implementing the Truth Commission recommendations, particularly the efforts made to consolidate a peace culture with a human rights-based approach. We welcome the close cooperation between Colombia and OHCHR, whose technical support has been key in strengthening institutional capacity and for opening inclusive dialogue with civil society. This is a valuable example for our region. We welcome efforts to protect social leaders and human rights defenders, and we also welcome progress towards transitional justice and to reform the security sector using a more human and participative approach. As a sister country, the Dominican Republic restates its historical closeness to Colombia, and we hope these proceedings continue to go further with the support of the international community. We restate our support for the key role of OHCHR and our conviction that when it's noticeable and sustained, technical cooperation is a powerful tool to bring about change. Thank you.
Thank you. Germany.
Mr. Vice President, Germany aligns itself with the statement of the European Union, and we would like to thank the Office of the High Commissioner for his comprehensive report. We recognize Colombia's efforts to address past and ongoing violations of international human rights and humanitarian law in the context of armed conflict, and we really appreciate the country's strong cooperation with the international community in this regard. At the same time, we remain concerned about the human rights situation, including with respect to human rights defenders, persons belonging to ethnic minorities, and minors who continue to be victims of forced recruitment. Widespread immunity remains a major challenge. And despite the efforts of the Colombian government, particularly rural and historically marginalized regions suffer from continuing conflict and gaps in state presence with limited access to basic services such as security, education, and healthcare. This is why Germany encourages Colombia to continue its cooperation with international mechanisms and welcomes its commitment to human rights and peace building. In closing, one question to the Office of the High Commissioner, if I may. We would like to know what further steps do you recommend to strengthen accountability and protection for vulnerable communities, especially in areas most affected by conflict and inequality? Thank you.
Thank you. Plurinational State of Bolivia.
Gracias,
Thank you, Vice President. Our thanks to the Office of the High Commissioner for the drafting and presentation of their report. We welcome the solid cooperation between his office and the national and local authorities of Colombia and with civil society. This is something that has allowed progress towards implementing the Truth Commission's recommendations. We highlight the political commitment of Colombia, and we would urge them to continue implementing the recommendations, also to strengthen programs and plans to fully implement the peace accords. We launch an appeal to all institutions and local authorities to support the government's efforts together with OHCHR. We regret the fact that there's been a direct impact on the capacities of OHCHR due to budgetary restrictions. And this has impeded progress in the 4 areas identified. We trust that there will continue to be progress in human rights on the ground, and this will partly come about through technical assistance to the state with their consent. We restate our commitment to supporting the people of Colombia and the government as they strive to protect all human rights and consolidate peace in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice.
Thank you, Vice President. Switzerland wishes to thank the High Commissioner for his report. Switzerland is concerned at the increase in violence and forced displacement which has resulted from violence, particularly in rural areas. Effective strategies to combat the expansion of illegal armed groups and to reach sustainable peace are imperative. We actively contribute to actions to bring about peace in Colombia, and measures against the recruitment of children in armed conflict are indispensable. Colombia is the most deadly country for defenders, and we would ask authorities to urgently strengthen mechanisms to protect them as well as social leaders. This is in line with the peace accords of 2016. We've been involved in peace processes for a long time, and so Switzerland insists on the importance of transitional justice mechanisms, as well as key elements such as the recognition of responsibility, truth reparation, and guarantee of non-recurrence. After the attack on the presidential pre-candidate Miguel Uribe Turbay, we call on the authorities to prevent hate speech and to take necessary measures to guarantee the safety of candidates and the exercise of political rights, looking forward to the legislative and presidential elections to be held next year. High Commissioner, what is your assessment of the impact of the presidential campaign on human rights challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ireland aligns with the statement of the EU and thanks the Office of the High Commissioner for its update. Ireland commends the commitment of the Colombian government to improving the human rights situation in the country, including through continued cooperation with the OHCHR and other human rights mechanisms. We welcome the reported advances made in the implementation of the 2016 peace agreement, notably the development of indicators for monitoring the implementation of the prioritized recommendations of the Truth Commission and the launch of the National System for the Search for Persons Deemed Missing. We reiterate our continuing support for all efforts to achieve lasting peace in Colombia. Nevertheless, the challenges reported are concerning, particularly in relation to limited resources for the OHCHR and the significant security risks faced by human rights defenders. Ireland continues to support the OHCHR in Colombia and wishes to emphasize its important role in promoting human rights. In this regard, we call for the adequate resourcing of the office in order to enable it to carry out its mandate. We remain deeply concerned by the high levels of violence towards human rights defenders and encourage the government to prioritize the adoption of the comprehensive policy on safeguards for human rights defenders. Ms. Kohonen, how can the international community ensure the meaningful inclusion of civil society in the advancement of such a comprehensive policy? I thank you.
Thank you. Cuba.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Cuba recognizes the political will of the government of Colombia, led by Gustavo Petro, and their cooperation with OHCHR in identifying actions to effectively implement the peace accord. Technical assistance and capacity building, it is proven, are very useful, and that cooperative, constructive cooperation is the only way to improve human rights. All of this can bring about specific changes on the ground, and this is quite different to punitive mechanisms that don't have the support of the countries concerned. There should be technical cooperation actions under the agenda items. Cuba supports Colombia's efforts to seek lasting peace, and that means acting in pursuant to the Latin American Declaration as a zone of peace. There must be a dialogue which truly contributes to institutional strengthening in a bid to protect all human rights for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. India. Not in the floor. Give the floor to Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, Российская
President, the Russian Federation supports efforts by the Colombian authorities to achieve peace and harmony across the country and resolving key issues in the human rights arena. However, Despite significant efforts, some problems remain unresolved. Prosecution of human rights advocates and the former combatants who have put down their arms, forced displacement and restrictions on the freedom to movement, violations of the right to and access to medical health care, kidnapping of people and involvement in domestic conflicts of minors. Many years of military actions have led to the formation of categories of professional combatants in Colombia who are present in hotspots across the world, Ukraine, Sudan, Libya, and a number of others. Private military companies work with them inside Colombia and abroad. We welcome the efforts of the Colombian authorities to ban by legislation such activities. We also urge the Colombian authorities to continue efforts already undertaken aimed at the unconditional compliance with the provisions of the final peace agreement, as well as creating the preconditions for an effective negotiations process to achieve sustainable peace in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. China.
Mr. President, we've taken note of the report of the High Commissioner to the Council. China's consistently stand for dialogue and cooperation, constructive dialogue and cooperation on the basis of equality and mutual respect. We are against politicization of human rights and interference in the internal affairs of concerned countries. We support the High Commissioner to provide capacity building and technical cooperation with consent of Colombia and befitting its national conditions and the requirement, and promote all human rights, including the right to development in a balanced manner. We commend Colombia for having promoted the social reform and the national peace process, and explore the right to path of development befitting its national conditions. We support the government of Colombia for its efforts to maintain national peace, stability, and security, and support its domestic peace process. We call on the international community to provide necessary assistance and support based on consultation and cooperation. We'd like to ask the High Commissioner how to enhance the local adaptation of human rights capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you. Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Gracias, señor Vice.
Thank you, Vice President. We wish to thank we welcome the presentation of the report. We welcome Colombia's willingness to continue making progress in implementing specific measures to improve the human rights situation. We recognize the efforts undertaken by the state and its institutions, particularly the adoption of a strategic plan for 2024 to 2028. Now, this plan aims to guarantee that persons have adequate access to justice and to meet the challenges of investigation and prosecution. We reiterate our support for all initiatives and actions that lead to peace in Colombia. In abiding by the universal principles of respect for sovereignty and non-interference in domestic affairs of states, which are enshrined in the UN Charter, and aware of the challenges that Colombia faces on human rights, we would urge multilateral bodies and competent international agencies to continue providing cooperation and technical assistance that Colombia requires. Thank you.
Thank you. Algeria.
Gracias, señor presidente. Argelia agradece a la
Thank you. Algeria wishes to thank OHCHR for the presentation of their report on the strengthening of technical cooperation and capacity building on human rights in Colombia. Algeria has always defended the principles of dialogue and cooperation, and we fully support this mandate, and we believe this is a constructive example of support between OHCHR and the country concerned. We are concerned at the potential impact of the financial crisis in the capacities of OHCHR and everything under Agenda Item 10. We hope that this will not lead to a scaling down of technical cooperation offered by the office, whether in Colombia or anywhere else in the world. We commend the progress that's been made by the government of Colombia in implementing the recommendations by the Truth Commission. And we welcome the efforts, the sustained efforts that have been made to overcome the problems posed by the previous conflict and putting in place a human rights-based approach. Algeria urges Colombia to continue its efforts in order to build a lasting, stable peace so that it can benefit the friendly nation and people of Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. This was the last speaker on our list. We will now turn to the list of speakers from UNHRIs and the NGOs. And the first on my list is a video intervention by CCEDJS.
Thank you for giving me the floor. This statement is delivered on behalf of the Justicia, a human rights-based organization in Colombia. As we approach the 10-year anniversary of the peace agreement, it is crucial to reckon with the persistent reality of global drug policies as drivers for violence, conflict, and insecurity in Colombia. The findings and recommendations from the Truth Commission in this regard are clear. The fight against drugs and its policies of prohibition constitute a persistence factor to conflict and violence in Colombia. The global paradigm of prohibition continues to provide resources for war making. The recommendations that we must not forget from the Truth Commission with regards to drug policies is to transition to legal and strict regulation. This recommendation is also aligned with the 2023 report from the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, recommending a shift away from punitive drug policies and encouraging member states to consider developing a regulatory system for legal access to all controlled substances. The negative impacts of global drug policies on human rights, the persistence of violence in Colombia, and the difficulties towards peace building cannot be disentangled. This resolution is an opportunity to integrate drug policy reform into capacity building efforts in the field of human rights and peace building in my country. As this resolution is discussed, we encourage the work of the Office and the Council to promote human rights-based drug policies, including cooperation for transition towards legal regulation that can better contribute to peace building.
Now, a video intervention by Oidako.
Presidencia.
Vice President, my organization welcomes the presentation of the report, and we commend the valuable work done by OHCHR in Colombia. The presence of OHCHR in Colombia, it remains indispensable for human rights protection to provide support to defenders and to civil society. Their mandate is added to and strengthens the work of other social organizations and agencies in order to meet the persistent challenges in the country. We are deeply concerned at the cut in resources to the office, which has led to closing offices in Antioquia, Chocó, and Meta, and the suspension of their presence in Cordoba and other places. This occurs just when the 2024 Violence Impact Index in 23 local authorities shows very high levels of violence. The absence of the office will mean that slowly there'll be a lowering of essential support for indigenous, Afro-descendant and rural peasant communities. We launch an appeal to member states to redouble their political and financial efforts to strengthen capacity of the office in Colombia. It's fundamental for them to be there in order to make progress in implementing the peace agreement to protect ethnic communities and those most affected by violence, and to ensure that human rights defenders are safe. Thank you.
Thank you. A video intervention by IDPC Consortium.
Gracias por concedérmelo.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm making the statement on behalf of different organizations in Colombia. We firmly support the work of OHCHR. Their work brings about significant changes aligned with some of the recommendations, including in OHCHR's 2023 report on drug policies. This embraces a comprehensive approach looking at health, peace building, and rural development. But Colombia's capacity to bring about change remains limited. As a result, there are punitive measures such as forced eradication of drugs, and this continues to harm the very communities the policy wishes to protect. Human rights violations in Colombia can't be addressed without also tackling the devastating impact of prohibition on the rights of life, especially for rural populations. We call on the international community and OHCHR to support reforms that move away from punitive policies towards human rights and social justice and alternatives for communities affected by the war on drugs. We urge member states to adopt a new resolution on the human rights implications of drug policy. This would strengthen the role of OHCHR in supporting countries to ensure that drug control is in line with their human rights obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. Colombian Commission of Jurists, video intervention.
Señor presidente.
President, for more than 20 years, the OHCHR for Human Rights has had a presence in Colombia, helping civil society and the state and providing support to communities that have been sorely affected by the armed conflict and providing support to victims that hope for justice and reparation. We're concerned at the financial cuts which have led to half of the team having to be dismissed. We've seen the closure of human rights offices and that in areas where the state presence has always been limited. In fact, we've seen massacres and forced recruitment in Guaviare and in Chocó. We've seen Afro-descendant communities confined. All of these events and others testify that, in fact, human rights challenges are increasing and becoming more severe throughout the country, and this makes the office's work all the more important. The work of OHCHR in Colombia is more necessary than ever, and that is why it's essential for this resolution to be adopted and implemented. Their work is crucial to contribute to the implementation of recommendations of the Truth Commission in order to supporting investigations into human rights violations. There must be more protection for human rights defenders. Thank you.
Thank you. Video intervention by PBI.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Vice President. We are concerned at the financial crisis affecting OHCHR in Colombia. We would urge states to redouble efforts to ensure that the office can continue to do its work, especially when their support is crucial in terms of the progressing to the implementation of the peace agreement and bring about lasting peace. The current context requires an urgent, coordinated response from the state when faced with a humanitarian crisis affecting ethnic and campesina people, such as in Catatumbo, Putumayo, Valle del Cauca, and Bajo Atrato. We see worsening of the conflict and armed illegal groups. These are leading to forced displacement, confinement, silencing, forced recruitment, and other serious violations. We reiterate the need to implement the public policy to dismantle criminal organizations, to adopt the comprehensive public policy of guarantees for human rights defenders, and strengthen measures for collective prevention and protection. In urban and rural context, ethnic communities and rural peasant communities have developed their own mechanisms for protection and non-violent resistance. This must be recognized and strengthened. This is happening in various areas of the country. We express alarm at the persistence of forced disappearances and urge the Council to support the pioneering comprehensive guarantee law for women searching for the disappeared, which was approved in 2024. Their effective implementation will represent a serious progress in combating this crime in Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you. This was an in-person statement, not a video statement, you see. My apologies. Now I give the floor to FIDH.
Mr. Vice President, FIDH, OWYBT, and CAHAR echo the High Commissioner's concern about the continuing violence disproportionately affecting indigenous communities in Colombia. In particular, we would like to draw your attention to the ongoing armed confrontations impacting the human rights of the Wiwa people of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, beneficiaries of precautionary measures granted by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights since 2005. On June 24th, clashes broke out between two armed groups in the Cogui Malayo Arhuaco Indigenous Reserve. Since then, armed actors have prohibited indigenous residents from leaving, threatening reprisals and accusing them of being informants, with at least 400 Wiwa families currently confined to their territories. In parallel, numerous Wiwa families have been displaced and forced recruitment of indigenous children is reportedly increasing. These events are part of a worsening pattern of human rights violations and breaches of international humanitarian law by armed groups in the region since 2023. The situation reflects the concerns underlined in the report, including the lack of state response and the persistent absence of effective protection mechanisms for indigenous peoples. We therefore urge the Council to keep the situation under close scrutiny and to press for stronger guarantees of non-repetition. We also call on the Colombian authorities to act on the Ombudsman Office early warnings issued since 2023 and to strengthen coordination with OHCHR, especially in territories where violence is escalating. I thank you.
Thank you. Now a video intervention by ISHR.
En Colombia, la promesa de una presencia integral del Estado.
In Colombia, the promise of a comprehensive peace faces persistent challenges. Despite many national plans, illegal armed groups continue to control territories. They affect communities and human rights defenders. From the ground, we view with concern that coordination between national policies and local authorities is weak or non-existent, and this perpetuates historical inequalities and makes it difficult to implement the peace agreement. There's a real gap between business interests, large-scale development projects, and human rights violations. We see threats, displacements, murders of social leaders. We therefore call on this council to urge the Colombian state to establish mandatory coordination between national and local authorities with clear resources. This will ensure that policies on security, peace, and human rights bring real results in areas affected. We also require guarantees for meaningful participation of ethnic communities and civil society organizations in putting the policies in place. This mustn't just be symbolic, it must be a real participation. And finally, we urge this council to promote the establishment of an international monitoring mechanism, allowing for clear links to be seen between corporate actors, investors, and state contractors and human rights violations in Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Solidarity Worldwide.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. CSW thanks the High Commissioner for his report on Colombia. Despite the clear targeting of religious and belief communities by illegal armed groups, the final report of Colombia's Commission for the Clarification of Truth, Coexistence and Non-Repetition fails to meaningfully address the decades of violations against individuals based on religion or belief. As recent developments in the country have made clear once again, this was a grave oversight. On the 4th and 5th of April, 8 individuals, including 7 Protestant church leaders and active church members, were forcibly disappeared after receiving orders to attend meetings with members of an illegal armed group in Guaviare department. Their bodies were later discovered in a mass grave in a rural part of the municipality, as confirmed in a statement issued by Colombia's Attorney General's office on the 1st of July. CSW calls on Colombia to recognize the specific vulnerability of religious leaders in the country and to ensure their access to government protection programs and security mechanisms and as and when necessary. We also urge the Office of the Attorney General to prioritize its investigations of killings of human rights defenders, including religious leaders, and to take urgent action to determine the whereabouts and well-being of the 8 individuals who were forcibly disappeared in Guaviare in April this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Alliance Global.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-Président.
Thank you, Vice President. We are happy to see the statements that we have heard. We are also happy to see the new FARC and peace agreement. This agreement will be 10 years old with substantial reforms. The society in Colombia has expected major results. The diplomatic corps also have expressed their serious concerns over the lack of progress. The Human Rights Council, as well as 15 unanimous members of the Security Council, have periodically called for the government to accelerate the implementation of the peace agreement. which has been deprived of a public policy, undermined by the poor results of total peace. The figures representing violence, assassinations, recruitment of children, and narco trafficking have constantly grown. The peace agreement contains hundreds of pertinent provisions to meet the reality in Colombia, but they have not been fully implemented or insufficiently implemented. It is more than urgent in the pre-electoral period in Colombia, as we see political concerns around violence continuing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Excellencies, this was the last speaker on the list. I will now give the floor to Madam Marit Kohonen Sharif to make her concluding remarks. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, distinguished delegates. Thank you for participating in the debate. And before I comment on your response on questions on Colombia, I wanted to make one general remark. Listening to this debate on Colombia, I think shows to us how the Human Rights Council can actually work at its best, at its most effective, and how it plays the role which is what conceived to play. It's with a cooperative government that recognizes and has the political openness that human rights promotion and protection is the right way to govern a country. It's with a recognition that an office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in country is actually not a punishment, but it is an added advantage. It has a value added in supporting the government. And I want to emphasize, because technical cooperation is a huge part, of course, of our mandate, but our office in Colombia has the full mandate, which includes monitoring, reporting, and issuing advocacy statements and raising human rights concerns with the government. That is open. But the role of the office is not seen as controversial. Rather, it's seen as productive and making a really important contribution to the various sectors of society. And where this council is unanimous that this office can play such a role, you also have adopted a resolution that provides resources. So that is the ideal situation where this Human Rights Council can make a difference to human rights at country level and in the lives of people. Of course, it's unfortunate that this goodwill and political opportunity coincides with the liquidity crisis of the regular budget. So the resources that you have attributed to the office are not available. And that means that without question, our capacity to extend the technical assistance that we could and for which there is an opportunity is not there, is fully reduced. And here I want to just pay tribute to the 46 staff of our office that are going to lose their jobs and not be able to contribute anymore to human rights protection in Colombia at this time. Many of them have dedicated 20 years of their professional career to doing that and have made a tremendous contribution. But then at the same time, in all your comments on Colombia, it is clear that the country is at the cusp where we must firmly protect the gains achieved and where we must fiercely ensure that the progress achieved in peace building is not rolled back as we move towards elections. And what needs to be done? What can we all do together and supporting the government to do that? Well, one of them is obviously, you've all mentioned it, the implementation of the peace agreement that has gone some way, but it needs to be reinforced. It needs to become more effective through additional budget allocations at national level, through institutional coordination mechanisms, but also state presence across the country, in particular in areas that have been historically affected by violence, in particular in pre-election times. In addition, there's a need to develop institutional planning instruments to monitor the implementation of the recommendations of the Truth Commission, including through the human rights-based indicators that have been developed. And the office has a prime role to play in that in supporting the Truth Commission. It's also true that there is heightened risk of violence at the moment because of the pre-electoral period and because in some areas non-state armed groups are indeed consolidating their social control over communities. So this highly politicized context will continue to sharpen as we move to elections if not enough early warning measures are put in place, preventive mechanisms, and particularly focus on those most affected. Those are human rights defendants, political activists, community and religious leaders, and candidates. And this extends to online, the heightened risk of online violence as well. So we need to take good care of that and work together towards that. In addition, many of you have mentioned the important role of civil society, and the office strongly in all its aspects of work ensures the participation of civil society. That's our role. We facilitate the dialogue, the participation of civil society and their interaction with the state mechanisms. For example, we facilitated the Attorney General's office to hold sessions with civil society organizations in their action plan to strengthen the capacity to investigate killings and attacks against human rights defenders, a key measure to bring down tensions, to prevent further violence. In addition, we really strongly would like to call on the office, on the government of Colombia, that the strategy for investigating cases of killings of human rights defenders is complemented by the policy of dismantling criminal organizations. That is the way to address some of the pre-electoral violence context. And finally, we would also recommend that the Colombian government continues its consultation with civil society platforms, in particular in adopting the comprehensive policy on guarantees for human rights defenders and expanding again budgetary and institutional capacity in this regard. So we have a moment to build a real culture of peace and dialogue together as an international community, but we do need the resources for it in addition to the political will that exists. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Distinguished participants, this brings us to the end of this interactive dialogue. I would like to thank Madam Kohonen Sharif for her participation. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we will now begin the interactive dialogue on the oral update of the independent expert on the situation of human rights in the Central African Republic. The list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. Now I have the honor to give the floor to Mr. Yao Agbetse to present the update. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Vice-Président.
President, Vice President, the Human Rights Council, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Resolution 57/35 of the Human Rights Council requests that I present orally updated information on technical assistance and capacity building in the human rights arena in the Central African Republic during this session. The situation has changed in the country. This is worthy of the attention and consideration of the international community. At the outset, please allow me to express my most sad condolences to the mourning family and the educational community after the drama of 25th of June in the Barthélemy Boganda Lyceum, where a number of baccalaureate candidates were killed or injured. Our country is at a crossroads. The international community must intensify its technical assistance for the country to come out of insecurity and become a new place for human rights to be secured, or the international community is demobilized. The CAR needs justice, peace, and development to move forward. We have challenges at a number of areas. First, the peace and reconciliation process. I note with satisfaction the 19th of April 2025, the government of Central Africa signed an agreement with two armed groups, the 3R group and the UPC. This peace agreement, complemented by the communique of 25th of April, brings together the two armed groups back into the political agreement for peace and reconciliation, and they cease hostilities, laying down their arms. On the 28th of April, the Central African authorities requested that all unities respect the ceasefire for all military operations in order to protect the civil population. The population is looking on at this, on behavior somewhat contradictory of the 3R group. In actual fact, since June, we have seen lethal outcomes of hostilities at Dangbari, and at Quim and Sanguilim, we have seen operations undertaken for disarmament. We call on the Central African authorities to continue the concrete acts that we have initiated for DDRR. The government must ensure that armed groups already dissolved, notably the RPRC, effectively go through a DDRR process. I call on MINUSCA and other technical and financial partners to provide support for the government to go through this process. As regards the neighbors of CAR, there's been a flow of Sudanese refugees, and trade with Sudan has been blocked, which has led to an increase in the prices of staples. We have seen recruitment of young people through the Rapid Response Force in the northeast. The border with Sudan is very transparent. This boosts transborder crime and trafficking, including of combatants and weapons. We must ensure that the CAR does not become a rear base for belligerent forces in Sudan. MINUSCA must continue and reinforce its strategy to secure the border, particularly in the northeast. Vice President, as regards human rights violations, these have not stopped in the past months. The MINUSCA monitoring mission has documented arrests and detentions in an arbitrary fashion, non-compliant with national and international law, as well as violations of the right to property, life, and psychological health. There has also been gender-based sexual violence, including in relation to recruitment. The 3R and the OPC signed the agreement, as I mentioned previously, on 2 dates, but they are the key perpetrators of violations of human rights and humanitarian law. They have also been behind violations and crimes in Ombum. We have seen the bilateral Russian force supporting them also involved. The court and tribunals continue to function with support from the United States. However, there is a Damocles sword hanging over this court, which needs predictable, permanent funding in order to function. After the failure of the first Truth, Justice, Reparation and Reconciliation Fund, the government took this in hand, putting in place a selection committee, which, in compliance with the 17th of April 2020 law that created that reparations committee, started to recruit the new members in line with the presidential decree. On the 12th of April, the 11 members were sworn in. There were new obstacles, which, if they are not overcome with firm or radical responses, can undermine the work of the new team of this commission. The placement of this body should be placed under the Justice Ministry, we believe, in order to better execute its mission of fighting impunity, facilitating national reconciliation. As I mentioned during the previous session, I call once again on the authorities without any delay to overhaul Article 7 of the law on the period of mandate of the committee. Despite the ability to bring strong responses to sexual violence and gender-based violence due to a lack of resources, it is necessary to see a broader deployment in the back country. As regards civil space, we now have a charter for civil and political rights with Article 23 on the freedom of expression, and also on peaceful assembly. These provisions guarantee the vitality of civil space as indicators of the degree of freedom, including democratic freedoms in the country. Peaceful protests by some political and social actors have been declined, hindered, prevented or postponed, such as a protest on the 31st of May on the Constitution, or on the 26th of June, organized by human rights defenders in an homage to the victims following an explosion of an electrical transformer at the Barthélemy Bocanda Lyceum. This peaceful march was dispersed by uniformed officers and human rights defenders. Fernand Mandé Najibu, Paul Crescent Benyenga, and Jeve Lacasso were arrested, handcuffed, imprisoned before they were eventually freed. Peaceful protests were refused, and for some authorized for others. These rights and fundamental freedoms must be respected within the framework of the law. All limits and restrictions must respect the requirements for legality, legitimacy, and necessity, appropriateness, social cohesion, proportionality in the context of the transitional justice in the country. In a democratic society, public order cannot be boiled down to authoritarian construct. It is part of a logic of social consensus built on the Republican contract and the Constitution of 2023. There must be articulation and balance between security and freedoms. This should not be a hindrance to order, but the very precondition of its legitimacy and its permanent status. On the 26th of May 2025, the National Assembly adopted a law on the freedom of the press and communications, some provisions of which, notably 130, 140, 151 and 193 are considered by professional journalists and media individuals as attacks on the freedom of the press. The law has created the conditions for the plurality of information, the protection of the quality of information and sources of the media, but several provisions imply new criminal sanctions, such as Article 151, which punishes journalists for libel. The freedom of the press is a pillar of democratic society. This is enshrined in Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ratified by the country on 8th of May 1981. It guarantees transparency, pluralism, and democratic control over the authorities. Its restriction by criminal punishments can lead to intimidation and self-censorship, weakening the role of the media as a counterbalance to power. Public individuals must accept a certain number of criticism in general debates, and this concerns the issue of preserving freedom of information in public debates. It is up to the state to assume its responsibilities as regards promulgation of these laws. As regards elections, 26th of June, in a communique, I called on the authorities for an institutional correction within the National Elections Authority with respect to the strategic organizational and operational requirements of the electoral calendar for 2025. The delays and dysfunctions noted call for a prompt reaction aimed at shoring up the structural capacities and functions of the National Elections Authority. We fear that in the absence of institutional reform, the constitutional timeline for legislative and presidential elections will not be respected, leading to a political crisis in the country. Local elections, as I've underscored many times, are a necessary trampoline towards building a governance of proximity that is vital for restoring national reconciliation. I would like to relay the call of the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, on the 26th of June at the Security Council. He called on the international community to support the country organizing elections in 2025, providing the resources which are currently lacking in the electoral budget. Turning to accelerating development, restoring and consolidating state authority cannot be effective without rehabilitating road infrastructure, but also justice, education, healthcare, drinking water, sport and culture infrastructure. Relaunching economic activity also requires these infrastructure to be structural, including in the rear country. Building local governance tools. The topic of the high-level meeting of the 15th session of this council is subject to the capacity of the authorities and technical and financial partners to overcome the challenges faced to provide basic social services to the population. The National Development Plan is a tool which can help achieve the SDGs. Achieving the execution of projects under the National Development Plan requires support from technical and financial partners, which need to fall in line with the priorities defined by the authorities. The country is highly dependent on international aid, and so the role of the international community must be guided better to line up with the technical and strategic capacities of the country to increase domestic financial resources. I would like to urge armed groups to renounce violence and lay down their arms. The people of this country requires a reconciliation process and peace. The weapons must fall silent now, definitively. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. According to our practice, we will start by hearing from the delegation of the country concerned. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Central African Republic. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président.
Thank you, Vice President. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. The Central African Republic has followed with very great attention the statement just made by the independent expert on the human rights situation in the Central African Republic. We welcome the commitment of his mandate to shed light on progress and on challenges, and we restate our willingness to participate in a constructive and respectful cooperation. We reiterate the homage of the President of the Republic and his government to the victims of the events of 25 June in the Barthélemy Boganda Lycée. An independent investigation is underway and structural measures have been taken to provide reparation for damages and prevent such tragedies in the future. Vice President, peace remains a priority. The agreement signed on 19 April 2025 with the 3R and UPC groups bears witness to our constant political will to find a lasting exit from this cycle of violence. Recent incidents certainly raise concerns, but they don't call into question our commitment. Human rights mechanisms are being reactivated, and we call on partners to provide technical assistance and logistical support. Relating the security situation, we condemn the attacks against the FACA, the Allied forces, and the Blue Helmets. Our country restates its attachment to security and safety for civilians and respect for international humanitarian law. Strengthening capacities and our defense forces is a necessity to guarantee effective, lasting protection for human rights throughout the country. On the violations which have been reported, the government is committed to combating impunity. National courts must undertake their work, and the Special Criminal Court continues to work despite budgetary challenges. We call for urgent mobilization of our partners to ensure its viability. Relaunching the Truth Commission with the appointment of new commissioners is progress which we consolidate, and any reform in its governance will be the subject of inclusive consultations. Our country wishes to restate our attachment to fundamental freedoms, Vice President. The freedom of the press and freedom of association and assembly are pillars of our democracy. Measures for demonstrations mentioned by the independent expert have been put in place. We remain open to dialogue with civil society and the media through the consideration of a law on the press. As to the electoral process, the government is fully aware of what has been reported and the violations reported. We are committed to reflecting on how to improve the efficacy of the National Electoral Authority in the respect of constitutional requirements and international standards. And we restate the importance of the National Development Plan 2024-28 as a way of bringing about structural reform. Consolidating the rule of law is also necessary through ensuring access to basic social services, amongst others. I cannot conclude, Vice President, without mentioning the humanitarian situations which remains of concern in our country. More than 3.4 million Central African citizens, more than half the population, still need urgent humanitarian assistance. We need access to healthcare, to drinking water, and to education, and this makes our population particularly vulnerable. Together with the partners, our government is doing its best to meet these needs, but the means available to us remain limited. This is why we launch an appeal for more mobilization from the international community in order to support us in our efforts for humanitarian recovery and looking to stability. More than ever, the Central African Republic needs reinforced support, which is coordinated and respectful, so that we can face our multiple challenges and offer our people a future of peace, justice, and dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished participants, just to remind that the list of speakers is now closed. I now invite interested delegations to ask questions to the independent expert and make comments on his report. And the first on my list is European Union. You have the floor.
Monsieur l'expert indépendant, l'Union...
Independent expert, the European Union wishes to thank you for this update on this human rights situation in the CAR. Despite some progress in combating impunity, and we still see violations of the rights of children and gender violence. We welcome MINUSCA. We support them because they carry out important work on documentation. Civilian populations remain the main victims of violations committed by all parties, including Wagner Group mercenaries, and their withdrawal is indispensable for a lasting peace. We have a 19 April ceasefire agreement, and it's essential for all involved to put in place the political agreement for peace and reconciliation and the Luanda roadmap. We welcome progress made to restore sovereignty and the authority of the state. The European Union encourages authorities and their partners to implement the national decentralization policy and the policy for territorial development. The European Union welcomes the essential work done by the Special Criminal Court on transitional justice and combating impunity, and we encourage financial support for it. The European Union sees that there's progress towards the next elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission echoes the concerns of the independent expert and other human rights organizations over the worsening human rights situation in the Central African Republic. Such actions have had a devastating impact on the lives of millions, causing immense suffering and hindering the prospects of peace and stability. The Commission is particularly concerned about the safety and security of Muslim minority who are subjected to targeted attacks and discrimination in access to basic services such as health care and education, particularly in rural areas. The conflict has severely hindered the delivery of essential services, leaving vulnerable populations without adequate access to vital resources. The Commission is planning to undertake a second fact-finding visit to Central African Republic, along with the representatives of the Islamic Development Bank and Islamic Solidarity Fund, to explore a possibility of establishing a humanitarian corridor. The Commission urges all stakeholders in the conflict to respect human rights of all, including Muslim minority, and ensure inclusive dialogue for building and sustaining an environment of trust and confidence for national reconciliation, access to justice, and institutional building. I thank you.
Thank you. Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice.
Thank you, Vice President. The DRC wishes to thank the independent expert for his oral update on the human rights situation in the Central African country. My country assesses the important efforts that the Central African government has been making in the human rights sector in a socio-economic and security situation which is difficult. We note with satisfaction the future holding of local presidential and legislative elections, which will provide a unique opportunity to strengthen democratic governance and improve stability in the long term. We also welcome the 19 April 2025 peace agreement between the government and the armed groups 3R and UPC, which also includes their progressive reintegration within the framework of the Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation. My country also welcomes the very good relations and cooperation which exists between OHCHR, its mechanisms, and the Central African Republic. And it's important for the international community, in our view, to continue to support the country as it works towards peace and development. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Egypt, who will be the last speaker for this session.
Shukran. Thank you, Vice President. We welcome the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights situation in Central African Republic, and we take note of his briefing, as well as efforts deployed by the country in order to implement human rights resolutions to support human rights and provide them for its people. We welcome the country's cooperation with various UN mechanisms, including the UPR, last year, and we encourage the country to cooperate further with the Council in order to improve human rights. In closing, we stress the important role of the Council in supporting technical cooperation mechanisms and capacity building with various countries, and we encourage more dialogue with concerned countries to listen to their worries and to get to know the best ways to help these countries in line with their priorities and needs, and in order to support and complement national human rights institutions. And thank you, President.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, we are already over the time, so we will stop here. We will reconvene in the afternoon at 3 p.m. to continue the interactive dialogue on the oral update of the independent expert on the situation of human rights in the Central African Republic, to be followed by the presentation of the High Commissioner report on cooperation with Georgia. And then we will begin taking action on the draft proposals. I would like to especially thank the interpreters for their flexibility in being with us for the additional time. I hereby declare closed the 29th meeting of the 59th session of the Human Rights Council. Bon appétit.